Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook, Marvel's Mutant Necromancer. Chapter 1. The Hudson River is a river in New York State, USA, with a length of 507 kilometers. It originates from Yunlei Lake in the Adirondack Mountains and flows into New York Harbor at the end. It is the economic lifeline of New York State. However, this does not mean that the Hudson River is so beautiful. In fact, when there were many factories on the banks of the river, the industrial sewage was directly discharged into the river. At that time, no living things in the river could survive alive. Fortunately, after humans began a new round of industrial revolution, those factories with high pollution and high energy consumption began to close down one after another, and the Hudson River began to gradually restore its original appearance. The abandoned factory workshops and docks on the river bank have gradually become a high occurrence place for some dark incidents in New York due to long-term no one to buy and take care of them. Of course, most of the dark incidents happened in the dark, especially on rainy nights. Heavy rain would wipe out most of the criminal evidence, making it impossible for the police to investigate. A black SUV drove into an abandoned factory on the bank of the Hudson River on such a rainy night, and the car parked skillfully on the bank of the river. It seems that the driver has come here more than once. It's raining a lot today. Hey, come down and help. A tall white man got out of the cab, cursed the weather, and then turned back and yelled into the car. Okay. Another thinner man also tightened his collar and got out from the co-pilot. This is bad luck. It was raining heavily, and the two had no intention of chatting, so they walked quickly to the back of the car and opened the back door of the SUV. With the back door of the car to block the rain, the skinny man felt a little better, but looked at the wriggling large travel bag in the car. He still curled his lips. What the hell did this kid do to need such trouble? HMPH, the boss is going to run for district council recently, and this kid saw something he shouldn't have seen, and even called the police. The boss said that he would get rid of him without leaving any traces. Call the police, the skinny boy exclaimed and looked around. Then won't the disappearance of this boy arouse the suspicion of the police? Don't worry, this unlucky guy happened to bump into a guy from the 47th precinct. Half of the police station there is our people, and his police reports are not recorded. However, in order to prevent him from going to other places to talk nonsense, or gotta deal with him. When the thin man suddenly realized, the travel bag in the car moved more violently. The people inside obviously heard the conversation between the two men, but it was all in vain, not to mention that he was now thrown into the bag with his hands tied behind his back. Even if he is not restricted, he cannot be the opponent of the two men outside. A young man was tied up in the travel bag. His name was Kane Zhou. He was of Chinese descent. His Chinese name was Zhou Ang. He had just passed his 20th birthday. He went to college in New York and worked as a bartender in a bar in his spare time. Last night, when he closed the door as usual and threw the garbage into the back alley, he found a dirty scene. A bald man lying on his stomach, a girl was doing nasty things, and two big men grabbed the girl's hand tightly and covered her mouth. Seeing the girl's helpless eyes and tears, Kane ran towards the alley entrance while the three men were stunned. Coincidentally, a night patrol police car passed by the alley entrance, and he rushed into the alley regardless of the danger. Police car, and reported what he saw to the two officers. However, things did not develop according to the normal process he imagined. The two policemen on duty took out their guns after seeing the two big men chasing from the alley, but when he thought they would catch the two when he was an accomplice, he felt a pain in the back of his head, and immediately before his eyes fell into darkness. When he woke up again, there was still darkness in front of his eyes, his hands were tied behind his back, and his mouth was stuck with tape. Through the sounds from around him, he found himself in a car, and soon the car stopped. Two men's voices came from above, and he realized that the two patrolmen were the legendary black policemen, and they happened to be bribed by those people he bumped into. Kane is strong by nature. Even in such a predicament, he did not despair because of it, but kept groping in the bag, trying to find a way to escape. However, as an ordinary person, the possibility of escaping from professional criminals is too low. These two guys were originally responsible for some dirty work in the gang. Kane is not the first, and he will definitely not be the last a man who died at their hands. The tall white man ignored Kane, who was writhing, greeted the thin man and grabbed one end of the travel bag, fastened a heavy dumbbell to it skillfully, and then he and the thin man grabbed one end of the bag and lifted it out. Kane, who was in the bag, felt something was wrong and twisted more violently. However, his movements did not cause too much trouble to the two men. They still lifted him to the shore swiftly and swung a little throw the bag into the Hudson River. The heavy dumbbell pulled the travel bag and quickly sank to the bottom of the river. Looking carefully, there were several similar travel bags piled up at the bottom of the river, with dumbbells tied at one end and covered with moss. It seemed that they were already here. It's been a while. Boom, a burst of mud and sand splashed, and the travel bag wrapped in cane sank to the bottom of the river. A large amount of river water poured into the bag and penetrated Kane's nose and mouth into his lungs. In a few seconds, he confused, the body stopped struggling. The two murderers on the shore looked down, confirmed that there would be no accidents, then turned around, got into the car, and drove away. However, at this moment, among the travel bags at the bottom of the river, a dark stone began to emit red light. The dark red light, like dirty blood, seemed to emanate from the center of the stone, and it flickered as if breathing. As the red light flickered on the stone, a gray gas gradually seeped out of the travel bag wrapped around Kane, drifting into the stone. The red light in the stone flashed faster and faster, and the speed of the gray gas permeating gradually accelerated, and the color also deepened. Slowly, a gray-white phantom floated out of the travel bag, presenting a human shape. From the looks of it, it looks like Kane. Seeing that the gray shadow was about to get out of Kane's body completely, his chest suddenly emitted a burst of golden light. With the appearance of the golden light, the speed of the gray shadow that looked like Kane getting out of the body was a little slower. Unfortunately, the golden light seemed very weak. It could only slow down the speed of the gray shadow entering the stone, but could not completely prevent it from continuing to pull the gray shadow. As Kane's gray shadow finally left his body, there was a slight cracking sound from his chest, and the golden light also penetrated into the gray shadow from his chest, and was absorbed by the red stone went in. When all the gray shadows of Kane entered, the stone no longer glowed, and the river was calm again, waiting for the next unfortunate person. I don't know how long it has been in the dark. Kane seems to have some feelings. The solid touch under his feet makes him feel familiar. He struggles to open his eyes, and finds that he seems to be standing on a platform. The platform does not know how big it is, only darkness was visible in the distance. He raised his eyes and looked forward, and vaguely found 7 tall stone pillars in front of him. The middle one was reddish, tallest and thickest, and the other 6 were arranged symmetrically in a stepped manner. Each stone pillar was covered with carved patterns. Those patterns are different, but they all look quite weird. Kane looked up, and there were 7 statues on the top of the stone pillar, each of which was extremely hideous, but they seemed familiar. He seemed to have seen this scene somewhere. Fear, hatred, destruction, I smell a wonderful soul. Just as Kane was looking at the statue at the top of the stone pillar, a deep voice came from the tallest stone pillar in the middle. When Kane cast his gaze there, 2 red lights shot out from the head of the statue. Oh hell, those were its eyes, and that statue was alive. Kane couldn't help but took a few steps back. The monster on the several-meter-high stone pillar was covered with thick spikes, and 2 rows of fangs were exposed from the cracked mouth. Environment, he felt that he might have encountered something even more unlucky. Well, after waiting for so long, the last soul has finally entered this place. I can't wait to go out and see the wonderful world. The statue on the pillar on the right in the middle also opened its eyes, revealing through the red light. It can be seen that it is a monster that looks like an octopus, and its 4 tentacles support its upper body like a spider. Its words seemed to be a signal, and the statues on the 7 stone pillars all came to life, opened their eyes of varying numbers, stared at Kane and let out a loud laugh. Even though Kane has a strong heart, he couldn't help being a little scared. These few words of the monster gave him some information. First, he is dead, because the monster mentioned the soul. Obviously he is no longer the body. Second, this is not the place where normal souls should go, and these monsters seem to need souls to be resurrected. He doesn't know where the outside world they are talking about is the real world. Unfortunately, he is now. There was no way to stop them, just like he couldn't prevent his soul from dying again before. It seems that there is no escape. The fear of death, the hatred of the cruel reality, and the killing intent of these powerful enemies who will wantonly influence his destiny are full of Kane's heart. At this moment, the monster who was originally on the tallest stone pillar suddenly appeared in front of him, and a face half as big as his body moved close to his face and took a deep breath. "Oh, a powerful soul, but you have a tragic fate. You are more beautiful than the 2 souls I devoured before. Come on, as a reward for devouring you, I will destroy your enemies for you, from body to soul. Now, let me taste it first. Let's taste it." The monster opened its mouth wide, and a sulphurous smell spewed out, and Cain finally saw the monster's appearance clearly. Diablo, Dreadlord, the smallest and most powerful of the dark triad that ruled hell. A powerful one. Cain has played this popular game all over the world, and has killed this demon countless times to obtain equipment. It's a pity that it's not a game now, and he is not a brave man with magic equipment. If he had to describe it, he is a villager that can be seen everywhere in the game, or the kind who is about to be buried in the belly of the devil. Now Cain has remembered, the monsters on the stone pillars are the 7 demon kings of hell in the game, and as one of the oldest and most powerful 3 demon kings, Diablo is not the NPC with brainless skills in the game. In fact, their cruelty and cunning stand above all demons, otherwise you would not have survived the battle with countless heroes and angels. Recognizing the other party's identity, Cain became even more desperate. No matter which version of Diablo the behemoth in front of him was, he was not something that a mere human could resist, and even delaying death was impossible. Just when Diablo's big mouth was about to bite him, 2 ripples appeared in the void behind him, and a pair of big hands stretched out from them, grabbed his shoulders and pulled him back violently. That space swallowed him like the surface of water, without leaving a trace. "No!" Diablo roared when he found that the delicious food was missing from his mouth. His huge claws ruthlessly grabbed at the void, but nothing was caught. "Are you okay, young man?" Before Cain could see where he was again, a voice sounded behind him, and he was so irritated that he turned around abruptly and put on a defensive posture. "Don't be afraid, young man, I have no malicious intentions." The voice sounded again, and there was no change in tone because of his actions. What caught Cain's eyes was a tall man with fair skin and handsome appearance, with long snow-white hair on his head. He was wearing a black robe with no pattern on the plain robe. The most special thing was his face, without a trace of wrinkle. Looks like he is only in his teens or 20s, but the eyes full of wisdom and experience in his golden eyes are like an older wise man. Cain is not a pessimist. Looking at the other person's smile, he thinks that the person in front of him should not be a bad person. After all, if he tried his best to save himself from Diablo just to do worse things, the cost would be unavoidable. It's also a bit too high. "I think it was you who rescued me from the devil. Thank you very much for everything you have done. I wonder if I would be lucky enough to know your name." Cain bowed gratefully to the man. "Hee, you can call me Rathma, young Nephilim." Nephilim. Cain looked at each other in surprise. He had played the latest Diablo and knew the meaning of the name. It represented the powerful life born from angels and demons, the ancestors of humans in Sanctuary. "No, Mr. Rathma, I think you misunderstood me. I'm just an ordinary human, and I'm not from your world, nor a Nephilim. Although I don't know why there are so many people like Diablo." Something related to the game, but Cain explained it immediately, and didn't want Rathma to miss a major event because of a misunderstanding. "No, I won't admit it wrong, your soul has the special mark of Nephilim, otherwise Diablo wouldn't be so impatient to devour you himself." Rathma pointed at the void with his finger while talking. Cain's chest clicked, and when he looked down, there was a golden mark on his chest that was emitting light. It was a circular imprint. In the center of the imprint were 3 patterns in the shape of Tai Chi yin-yang fish connected end to end, and engraved on the outer ring of the pattern was a string of ancient characters. Even Cain, who was proficient in Chinese and English, would not be able to recognize it. What was written there, but he was sure it was from the East, because they were completely different from the Western scripts that evolved from cuneiform. "Your appearance is very similar to that of Shansai people, but the mark of Vatican is engraved on your soul. I don't know how bizarre your life experience is, but both of them prove your identity." Rathma smiled said. "No, I think there must be some misunderstanding. This mark was originally engraved on an amulet on my chest. I don't know how it appeared on my chest. The Nephilim you mentioned as a game I played, I'm sure I'm not one of the races." Cain recognized the appearance of this mark, which was given to him by his grandfather, and asked him to wear it close to his body, and he didn't know why it appeared in his soul chest. "Really, what about this?" Rathma interrupted Cain, and condensed a cloud of blue-gray gas in his hand, which penetrated into Kane's body in an instant. With the gas entering, Kane felt a strange energy flowing in his body. It wasn't painful, nor did he feel hot or cold. Peace was the only word Kane could describe it. It seems that you are not as ordinary as you imagined. This is the spirit, a kind of energy that only Nephilim can master, but you can absorb it without any abnormality. Now, you feel that you are just an ordinary people, and Nephilim is just a character in the game. Rathma's words made Kane grow his mouth, and after living for 20 years, it was the first time that he knew that he was not an ordinary person, and that he might have strange bloodline, but after thinking about it, he was not so excited. What if he was Nephilim? Now that he is dead and has become a soul, what can he do even if he is the Archangel Tyrael? Well, this is not a game that can be resurrected infinitely. Thank you very much for telling me this. However, I think a dead Nephilim is just a soul. Although I don't know where the final destination of the soul will be, it probably won't be in this place. Kai-En smiled wryly and looked around. He was in a verdant prairie. Nothing else could be seen on the endless prairie, only Rathma and a stone house behind him. Hee, don't worry about young people. Fortunately, you met me. I happen to have a way to bring your soul back to the world. Rathma laughed. Really, you're not kidding, are you? Kane stared at Rathma expectantly. Although he was open-minded about death, who would choose to die if given the chance to live? Of course, I created the way of balance and passed it on. My disciples named this inheritance the Rathma sect. We are proficient in the magic of life and death. Resurrection is not an incredible thing. Great, you are as great as an angel. I hope you can cast a spell to revive me as soon as possible. I am afraid that something will happen to my body if it is soaked in water for too long. Kane said anxiously. You must know his body is still soaking in the Hudson River. If it starts to swell after a long time, even if he is resurrected, he won't be able to get it. Young man, don't worry, there is still a little problem here. Seeing Kane so anxious, Rathma suddenly showed a little embarrassment. Seeing Rathma's expression like a prophet, Kane felt an ominous premonition in his heart. After Rathma's explanation, Kane knew that resurrection was possible, but there were still many twists and turns. It turned out that after the Nephilims defeated Diablo again, the dead angel Marthel, who fell into darkness, brought the Dark Soul Stone that imprisoned all the demon kings to the legendary Third World, the main battlefield of the Eternal War Chaos Realm. He wants to reshape the Dark Soul Stone here, end all creatures in Saint Theria except angels, and devour all the demon essence in Sanctuary, of course, including humans with demon blood. Finally, after counterattacks by countless Nephilim warriors and Tyrael, Malthal, the incarnation of death, was wiped out in an energy explosion full of void and sorrow, releasing all the souls that were swallowed, and among them including Diablo and 6 other demon kings. The cunning devil knew that he was no match for Nephilim and Tyrael in a weak state, so he got into a fragment of the Dark Soul Stone and used the energy of Malthal's dying explosion to pass through the space barrier and come to the new world, that is, the Earth. Rathma, who was hidden in the Targol domain, noticed this keenly, and walked out from it to start tracking the Dark Soul Stone. When he was about to grab the Dark Soul Stone in the endless void, he was caught by the void. A strong suction force was absorbed into a space, and finally fell short. Rathma, who was imprisoned in this space, was not discouraged. He continued to search for the demon kings in the Dark Soul Stone through the power of demons in his blood. Finally, just when Diablo was about to devour Kane, he broke through. Opened the space barrier to save his soul from the Dark Soul Stone, and added a restriction on the Dark Soul Stone, so that the devil can no longer absorb the soul to strengthen himself, lest they come out of the Soul Stone to harm the human beings on the earth. Of course, this is not without cost. After completing all this, Rathma has little energy left, and it is difficult to open a space channel to send Kane's soul back to Earth. So, I can only revive after your energy recovers. Kane was a little desperate, because it didn't sound like something that could be done in a short time, and his body would probably be left by then. Some bones are gone. Sorry, young man, I'm afraid I still need your help in this matter. It turns out that Rathma's way of balance spell needs a lot of spirits, but there are no animals in this seemingly beautiful space. You must know that the way of balance spell is based on spirits, and the only source of spirits is the souls of creatures. Rathma, who has lost the source of his spirit, can no longer release such a huge spell that breaks through the space barrier, and he hopes that Kane can learn the way of balance and go out to collect spirits to help him out of trouble, because when he pulled Kane in a hurry after entering this world, he found that although he could not leave this space, Kane seemed to be able to enter and exit at will without being restricted by this space. The priests of Rathma can inject spirits into each other without hindrance. Therefore, in order to return to the earth and help the Savior get out of trouble, Kane became a student of Rathma and began to learn his way of balance. Of course, by learning his I also know another name of the way of balance, undead spell. Manhattan is known as the heart of New York, because there are countless well-known corporate headquarters here. However, this heart is not completely healthy, and it also has some diseased places, such as a few blocks centered on 39th Street. Here, although it is also located on the island of Manhattan, it is known as Hell's Kitchen due to frequent crimes and rampant gangs. There is a small bar at the end of the alley next to the 41st block. This is a bar with a long history, as old as this street. The nearby residents like to settle their breakfast here. The Chinese boss here is very good at craftsmanship. Thankfully, he passed the craft on to his grandson before his death, a spirited Chinese-American lad whose name is exactly the same as Kane, but whose parents died in a car accident when he was a child. When his grandfather grew up, he inherited the bar as a matter of course. However, the surrounding residents may have to go to other places for breakfast tomorrow morning, because the spirited little boss is now lying on the cold floor. Bright red blood is flowing from a gunshot hole in his heart, and the two holding the man with the gun was rummaging through the cash register. Shit, there's only $500 here. Don't you mean that the yellow-skinned monkeys are very good at saving money? Where are they hiding the money? A thin man with yellow teeth angrily smashed the handle of a gun at the cash register. From his trembling hands, it could be seen that the drugs had almost crippled his nerves. Let's go upstairs and have a look. I heard that they don't like to keep their money in the bank. They like to keep it at home. Maybe we can find a safe or something. Took the life of an innocent young man. Hey, where are you going? Just as the two addicts were about to go upstairs to search, a voice suddenly sounded from behind them. The two of them turned around in horror, and found that the little boss who had been shot in the chest was getting up from the ground. With the movement of getting up, his half-long black hair began to turn white slowly. The junkie remembered the movie he had seen. It seemed that the zombies in it got up like this. Ah, 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 the gun-wielding man in extreme fear shot at the little boss crazily. Unfortunately, the drugs eroded his nerves and his fear made him miss a single shot. God knows they just broke into the small bar. How did he kill the little boss with one shot? The little boss who completed the change in an instant has actually become Kane. Rathma exhausted all his mana and finally sent him out, but because there was not much mana left, Rathma said that he could only use his the soul is sent to the world where that space is, and try to find a freshly dead body that matches his original body to be resurrected. It has to be said that Rathma is a competent mentor. After sending Kane into this newly dead body, he also left a little spirit for Kane so that he can cast spells. Repent for everything you have done. When Kane's soul entered this body, he knew the misfortune he had encountered from the little boss's last dissipated soul, which also reminded Kane of his own death. Furious at these villains, he summoned the spirit within him to release the life siphon. As he raised his palm, a red and white energy ripple seeped out from the facial features of the man with the gun, and connected to his palm at an extremely fast speed. The ripple kept pouring into Kane, and the skin of the gunman shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Correspondingly, the gunhole on Kane's chest was rapidly shrinking and healing. Ah, this weird scene frightened the man with the gun's companion, and while Kane was casting a spell and had no time to pay attention to him, he fell down the stairs in a panic and ran out of the door desperately. Since it was the first time he cast a spell after learning the undead spell, Kane, who was not yet proficient, took about 10 seconds to suck the man with the gun into a mummy, and this time was enough for the other guy to run outside the door. Kane, who has suffered the test of life and death, is no longer that silly kid. He has a kind of hatred for these evil people. Based on the principle of eliminating evil, he took a step to chase them out. The bar is located at the end of an alley, and there is only one exit leading to the street outside the door. Kane found the direction as soon as he went out, and saw the guy who was fleeing in a hurry. The little gangster who was affected by fear kept looking back at Kane, and bumped into a big man passing by the street without noticing. The big man looked extremely burly, and instead of knocking him down, the little fool sat down on the ground because of the reaction force. He glanced hastily and saw the pistol hanging on the waist of the big man, rushed forward as if seeing a savior, and hid behind the big man, shouting, "Quick, whether you are a policeman or someone else, kill that monster. I am Handsome Billy's subordinate, it will be to your advantage to save me." Handsome Billy. The lights on the street shrouded the big man's face in darkness, making it difficult for people to see his appearance clearly. "Yes, you know my boss. Great, hurry up and kill that monster, he just killed Jim." The little gangster hugged the big man's leg in surprise, looking up to recognize the savior. Puff. What answered him was a sharp tactical dagger. The big man skillfully pulled out the dagger from his thigh, and stabbed it into the head of the little gangster. The lights on the street illuminated the half of the big man's sideways body, allowing Kane to see clear the huge white skull on the body armor on his chest. Hell, is this the world of Marvel? Kane's heart was shocked. How could he, who loved watching superhero movies in his previous life, not recognize the Punisher's iconic costume? In the world. Punisher Frank Castor, the most famous anti-hero of ordinary people in the Marvel world, he is not saving the world every day like Iron Man or Captain America. Shots are almost never left alive. Compared with those aloof superheroes, Kane prefers the Punisher, because only he has been fighting against evil forces and is closer to the lives of ordinary people. However, it seems that the Punisher is not in a good state now. After killing the gangster, his body shook a bit, and he leaned against the wall to stabilize his body. Kane quickly gathered the power of the spirit into his eyes, and opened the spell that all priests of Rathma knew, the Eye of Rathma. His eyes turned white, and he found that the soul in the Punisher was a little fuzzy, as if he had been injured. Before he could see exactly where his body was hurt, the Punisher staggered again and fell. Frank, who was lying on the bed, woke up, but he didn't open his eyes immediately, because years of combat experience told him that it is not a good idea to tell others that he is awake at the first time in an unfamiliar environment. He quietly used his body to after feeling it, he found that his combat uniform had been taken off, and all weapons were gone, but the bullets in the wound had been taken out, and someone helped him wrap a bandage. It seems that the person who saved him did not have any malicious intentions. Frank was relieved, because no one, whether it was the police or the gangsters, dared not put handcuffs on him, even if he was injured. Frank opened his eyes and immediately saw Kane sitting across from the bed. "Hello, Mr. Custer, my name is Kane Joe. I'm sorry that there are only some simple treatment tools at home. If you feel uncomfortable, I can go to the pharmacy tomorrow to buy some more medicines. You know me." Frank moved his shot shoulder, and found that the white-haired young man on the opposite side had good skills, and the wound was not enlarged by taking the bullet. "Yes, it's hard for people not to recognize you with such an obvious mark." Kane smiled and pointed to the body armor with the skull mark on it, and when he turned around, he found that Frank didn't know where to pull it out. He pointed his pistol to his forehead. "I heard that fool call you a monster before he died. Can you tell me what's going on? Also, gunshot wounds are not easy for everyone to deal with. I hope to know your true identity." Ju Jing Frank on the battlefield has never left his gun, and since the war with the underworld, he has cut off contact with all relatives and friends, and this white-haired young man is definitely not among the few friends he has. Before Frank woke up, Kane had already thought about it. The Marvel world is quite dangerous, full of all kinds of superpower heroes and villains, and with his ability as a Rathma sect mage, I am afraid that in terms of actual combat ability it's similar to Frank the Punisher. If he kills innocent people at will for the sake of his spirit, he may be approached by various heroes in a few days. At that time, he may not be so lucky to meet a good person like Rathma again. Furthermore, Kane, who was well educated since he was a child, is not the kind of perverted murderer, and out of hatred for the gangsters who murdered him, he doesn't mind getting spirits from them to grow. Frank the Punisher is the best opportunity, because he is not an orthodox hero like Spider-Man, and there has never been a lack of dead people around him, and this is what Kane urgently needs now. Kane is my real name, and as for that fool calling me a monster and my ability to heal you, it's because I'm a mage. Mage. Frank frowned. He knew Daredevil Matt Murdock, and he also had a relationship with Deadpool. He knew that there are some mutants with special abilities among humans, but the mage sounds this is the first time I have heard of a profession with inheritance. Yes, our official name is Rathma Priest, and we believe in the way of practicing balance. However, some ignorant people prefer to call us necromancers. Kane released a spirit from his hand while speaking. The blue-white energy group condensed into a skull in the void, grinning loudly at Frank. Frank's hand holding the gun finally trembled a little. He is just a normal person. At most he has the highest combat effectiveness among normal people. He is somewhat afraid of these people with supernatural abilities. However, Kane's words dispelled his worries. The spell just now didn't look like a blindfold, and a person with such a special ability obviously didn't need to use any conspiracy against him. He really didn't have anything worth coveting. But his own life is worth a reward. Frank put down his gun and nodded at Kane. Thank you very much for your help, otherwise I might be in trouble tonight. You don't need to be so polite. Kane waved his hand. I know something about what you did from the newspapers, and it's a great thing to do for the people. To be honest, I've always wanted to be a person like you who can kill violence and make good. Unfortunately, my teacher has not approved me to become a teacher, so I can only silently cheer for you before. Unexpectedly, after listening to Kane's words, Frank not only did not show a smile, but fell down on the sofa next to him, as if he was touched by these words. What's the matter, Mr. Castor? Did I say something wrong? Kane asked with concern. He didn't expect the Punisher, who has always shown himself as a tough guy in comics, to show such an expression. Frank waved his hand. Call me Frank, my friends call me that. I may not kill all the people who should be killed. I killed a good man, an undercover police detective, by mistake during the operation tonight. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't even know if I've killed other good people by mistake before. It can be seen that this incident hit Frank very hard. Kane looked at the man in front of him with his face deeply buried in his hands. It was hard to imagine that a tough guy would confide so much privacy to a stranger he met for the first time. This can only show that his heart has been messed up. Frank, don't blame yourself so much. Your goals are actually the same, to cut off the evil, but because of some misunderstandings, you killed him by mistake. It was just an accident. I remember that you once wrote in the newspaper he is a Navy SEAL. Isn't there any accidental injury on the battlefield? Since you killed him by mistake, then what you should do is to fulfill his mission and ideal, instead of complaining about yourself here. This will not bring him back from the dead. Kai, while enlightening Frank, and injected a trace of spirit into his body, which could calm down his restless soul because of self-blame. This is a small spell for soul comfort, a unique method of priests of Rathma. Wandering between life and death, they are best at dealing with souls. Under the dual effects of Kane's words and spells, Frank finally cheered up. He nodded to Kane to express his gratitude. I think you were right. No matter how upset I am, I can't revive that detective, but I have helped him fulfill his last wish. His undercover gang of Handsome Billy was all arrested last night, and I sent Billy into a glass smasher, so he must be dead by now. Well, by the way, the police detective's funeral should be held in a few days. Why don't we go and see if there is anything in his home that needs help, and if we can help, we will do our best. One mind. After all, Kane inherited Priest Rathma's ability to control the soul, and he unknowingly said that Frank's matter was the matter of the two of them, and Frank also began to treat him as a friend. At least there was no objection to his proposal. In the Wellington Cemetery on the outskirts of New York City, countless small trees grow here, adding a bit of silence to the entire cemetery, but also providing some convenience for those who are not convenient to show up. Kane and Frank hid behind a small tree, watching the ongoing funeral from a distance. The one who was being buried was the FBI agent who Frank mistakenly killed. Almost all his colleagues came, and Frank saw all the time his eyes were fixed on a woman with a little girl beside him, apparently the widow and daughter of the detective named Donatelli. After the funeral was over, the detectives escorted the mother and daughter away, and the little girl seemed to sense something, turned her head to look in the direction of Kane and the others, and then followed her mother to the car and left the cemetery. Frank turned around silently and walked deep into the cemetery. Kane followed him to an old tombstone. Seeing that the three names above were all named Custer, Kane knew that this belonged to the Punisher's wife and child, Tomb. It seems that the mother and daughter just now made Frank a little emotional. While wiping the tombstone vigorously, he said half to himself and half confiding, "Since the moment my wife and children died 4 years ago, I have sworn to kill all the guilty people, even at the expense of their lives, but now I killed a good person with the same purpose as mine, and let his family experience the same pain as mine. Maybe, I also slowly becoming the kind of person I hate the most, and I should actually go to hell. Kane didn't have Frank's experience, but his death experience was equally unforgettable. Listening to Frank's depressed words, Kane seemed to see New York City without the Punisher. Day and night are distinct, and all justice in the world follows the sun in the fall. Crime rules the city, ordinary people are in constant panic, their lives cannot be controlled by themselves, justice, axiom, and law have all become jokes, and anyone may die unexpectedly. Boom. This is not the Punisher he is familiar with. Finally, Kane couldn't bear it anymore. He pushed the confused Frank to the tree, stared at him angrily and said loudly, "What are you doing? Guilt, self-blame, so you want to just die? Let me tell you, dying isn't painful, it's more like a relief, and living is the hardest, because you have endless responsibilities on your back. Everyone makes mistakes. Frank, you dealt with assholes, they will take advantage of the loopholes of the law, they will not be punished by the law, no one can punish them except you and me, and without our restraint, more innocent people will be victimized. Don't be a coward looking for life and death, what you need to do is to kill more villains who put these excellent detectives in danger. Why does it look like you are more excited than me?" Frank seemed to be awakened by Kane. He rubbed his neck. This young boy seemed to have strong hands. Kane let go of his hand in embarrassment, and said truthfully, "Because I have died at the hands of these villains, and I don't even have a decent grave. If my teacher hadn't resurrected me, the current me, I'm afraid it has already been included in the list of missing persons." Kane almost slipped his mouth, but Frank didn't notice it, because he was more interested in another matter, resurrection. "You mean your spells can resurrect people?" Of course Kane knew what he meant, but unfortunately, he really couldn't do that. "I'm sorry Frank, the resurrection of the dead requires a strong ability to control spells, and at least it can be released at the level of a necromancer. At most, it can be regarded as a formal mage now, and it will take some time to practice. Moreover, with all due respect, the conditions for the recovery of the dead are very harsh, and the soul needs to leave the body not long ago." Frank was not too disappointed about this, he just asked. After all, 4 years have passed, and he has been able to accept the fact that his wife and children have died, but after learning about Kane's skills, he still has a little bit of doubt in his heart. "Just a fantasy." "Well, I'm just a little whimsical, that's all right. By the way, do you think they need some money? The federal agent's pension may not be too much, and the child is still too young. I think there will be more money behind them. A place to spend less money." Frank didn't want to embarrass Kane too much, so he immediately changed the subject. Kane frowned. He didn't object to this approach. The problem was that he searched through the memories of the little boss in his mind, but he didn't find much money left in the bar, especially since the little boss just spent money to renovate the bar not long ago. Otherwise it would not lead to a murderous disaster. "Don't worry, I still have a lot of money, which was collected from those gangsters over the years, enough for the mother and daughter." As if seeing Kane's embarrassment, Frank took care of everything himself. "Well, okay, if there is anything you need me to say, that bar is mine, it's safe." Kane bid farewell to Frank and returned to the bar. As soon as he entered the door, he hung the closed sign on the door, and then walked into the basement. The basement of the bar is larger than ordinary people because of the need to store alcohol. Kane is very satisfied with this, because he wants to practice spells here, and a large and private space is exactly what he needs. At the end of the basement, I opened the door of the cold storage, and the corpses of the 2 gangsters were inside. I have to say that modern technology is still very useful, at least Kane doesn't have to worry about the preservation of the corpses. After moving the 2 corpses out, Kane was about to start experimenting with the newly learned spells. Priests of Rathma's spell inheritance is open, and they can learn all undead spells from the beginning of apprenticeship, but most of the powerful spells it needs a lot of spirits to support it. Even if the apprentice priests learn it, they can't cast it. Moreover, as the priest's rank is higher, the more spirits they can control freely, and they can give spells more power. Variety. There are not many ranks for priests of Rathma, and there are only 4 ranks in total: apprentice priest, official priest, master of the dead, and death whisperer, but the gap between each rank is very large. For example, the skeleton warriors summoned by priests and apprentices can bully ordinary people. Even well-trained soldiers may not be able to fight against them. However, the skeleton warriors summoned by the master of the necromancer have a certain ability even against angels and demons. As for the Death Whispers, they are all the leaders of Rathma priests in different eras, and their skeleton warriors can even compete with Diablo and other demon gods. Looking at the two corpses, Cain raised his right hand, and a pale dagger suddenly appeared in his hand. It seemed to be carved from a single piece of ivory. The blade part was snake-shaped and twisted, and the handle was engraved with a mysterious symbol. This is a bone dagger, which is a necessity for every Rathma priest, just like every priest will carry a cross with him. Of course, this bone dagger is much more useful than a cross. This bone dagger is the only thing that Rathma gave Cain, and it is also a symbol of Cain's apprenticeship. Compared with other bone daggers, it is more noble because it is made of a rib from Rathma's body. The dagger is an important spell-casting tool for the priests of Rathma. It has been closely connected with the souls of the priests from the moment of birth. It is like the wand in Harry Potter. Of course, it is not impossible to cast spells without the bone dagger, but in that case, the time and effect of spell casting will be greatly reduced. Its effect is more than that. Rathma priests who hold the bone dagger will obtain the true meaning of the soul and the way of balance from it, so that their mental resistance is extremely strong, and mental control and corruption are almost useless to them. On the contrary, they will be more comfortable using soul-type spells. Moreover, the bone dagger is not just a spell-casting tool, it is also a real weapon. It can cause great damage to undead creatures, and it can also seriously injure living creatures with extremely shallow wounds. Moreover, Priest Rathma they are not mages in the conventional sense. In fact, they have quite a lot of hand-to-hand combat skills in their courses. At least they are not much weaker than assassins in the use of daggers, and the two-handed scythe is also a weapon they often use. In comparison, Priest Rathma is more like the mage Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. They can definitely do the thing of slashing people with a scythe if they don't agree with each other. Anyway, Cain, who learned the sickle technique from Rathma, thinks that if he soon after learning these skills, it probably took less than 10 seconds to kill the strong men who caught him at the beginning. Cain put the bone dagger in front of his chest, whispered a spell, stretched out his right hand, and a gray-white spirit burrowed into one of the corpses from his palm. There was a crackling sound, and a skeleton stood up from the corpse, leaving only a piece of rotten flesh. This skeleton is not the last appearance of ordinary corpses, except for the important bones that support it to stand and move. The other bones have become the bone sword that it holds in both hands. Although the blade is not sharp enough, the bone spurs all over it will definitely cause a lot of damage to the enemy. Well, looking at the hideous skeleton warrior, Cain nodded. Now he looks a bit like a necromancer, at least he can be regarded as a skeleton soldier, but after thinking about it, he became depressed again. It's still the same reason. This is the world of Marvel, people with superpowers abound, and this skeleton soldier doesn't look like a decent spell. If I bring this thing around the market, let alone cause commotion among ordinary people, what should I do? It would be self-inflicted to let some idle hero beat him up one day. He didn't think this skeleton warrior could deal with high-flying guys like Iron Man or Spider-Man. There is no way. It seems that this thing will not be able to be taken out for a while. Cain sighed helplessly, and gave the skeleton warrior an order to guard the basement and no longer care about it. As long as the calcium has not been lost, it can be a qualified housekeeper, and it is much more reliable than a dog because it is tireless. After trying the bone spear technique again, Cain stopped the experiment. The amount of spirit absorbed from the two guys is limited, and he cannot be allowed to squander it without limit. It seems that the only way to solve the spirit problem is to form a team with Frank as soon as possible. At least Cain doesn't have any psychological burden to kill the gangsters who do all kinds of crimes, and the Punisher is even more ruthless than him, so the spirit is absolutely indispensable. Putting away the bone dagger, Cain walked out of the basement. He planned to go out to collect some spirits by himself. Although Teacher Rathma clearly told him not to act too hastily when he was sent out, after all, the world of the strange space where Rathma was imprisoned could appear. I'm afraid it's not that simple. He doesn't want Cain, the youngest direct disciple, to die early, but Cain doesn't want to wait for things to happen like the priest of Rathma in the sanctuary. Taking the initiative is what people of his age do. Style. Because of being constantly bombarded by Marvel superhero movies these years, Cain also has a general understanding of this world. The Earth is the main battlefield of the Marvel world. Countless enemies that can destroy the world will come here one after another, fighting against the Avengers. It can be said that this world will not be safer than the world of Sanctuary, and strength is an important guarantee for him to finally return to his homeland. If he cannot improve his strength as soon as possible, maybe a Chitauri invasion or a Hulk war, if you hate yourself, you will die. At that time, no one will be able to revive yourself again. It seems that I have to start learning to be a hero. Kane looked at the darkness outside the bar and smiled self-deprecatingly, but before that, he needs some disguise. He is not Iron Man. It's troublesome for her real identity. Kane went upstairs and rummaged through the closet. Well, this hoodie is good. You can hide your eyes and the upper part of your face by lowering your head, but that's all. Other clothes are not helpful for hiding your identity. How could a small bar owner hide something like a masked bodysuit in his closet? Kane thought about it, and went back to the basement again. His first skeleton warrior, Pippi, stood aside like a real specimen. Pippi was a dog raised in his previous life. Kane felt that the role of the skeleton warrior was similar to Pippi, as about the same. You don't even have to pull it out for a walk, so you gave it this name. Of course, Kane didn't look for it. He went straight to the other corpse that made him a target, and stretched out his hand again. What he absorbed was no longer the spirit, but the bones in the corpse. This is the bone armor technique of the Rathma priest. It can absorb bone from corpses or even living things to form bone armor on the body. The necromancer can even use the bone armor technique to wrap himself into a heavy knight. Of course, Kane doesn't need so much bone. He just compressed the bone into a mask and put it on his face. I don't know if he has been affected by the way of balance after practicing for a long time. This mask looks like a skeleton. Look. Kane, dressed well, walked out of the bar. This world has ushered in another dark hero, and he will be as ruthless as the Punisher. If he knew in advance, those evil guys would probably cry come out, but the average person in New York City will probably be a little safer. On the 51st block, on the edge of Hell's Kitchen, a young girl hurriedly passed by late at night. She is a dancer and just came home from get-off work on Broadway. She knows this place is dangerous, but Manhattan only rents here. It was something she could afford. She had no choice. Bang! A noise in the alley across the road startled her, and she was relieved until a black cat came out of the trash can, but she was a little too happy. A cat full of marijuana smelled. Dirty hands covered her mouth and dragged her into the alley behind him. The three men pinned her to the wall, gestured at her face with a dagger, and then smiled lewdly at her. The unarmed girl could only beg for mercy in a trembling voice. Please, don't hurt me. I still have $50 in my bag. Give it all to you. Let me go. Shut up, fool. The gangster in the head yelled at her. You earned more than that amount from a blowjob for those rich guys. Don't think you can fool me, Mad Dog Harry. No, I'm not that kind of person. I really don't have money. I didn't lie to you. The girl continued to plead, hoping that these villains could find out with a conscience that there were indeed people like that in their dance troupe, but they definitely wouldn't be like her live in this kind of place. Boss, it's really only $50. The gangster next to him had already searched the girl's handbag for the first time, but unfortunately he really didn't find anything more valuable. It's really unlucky, but forget it. You look pretty good. Then give it to our third brother tonight. Maybe I can let you go. Of course, Mad Dog Harry will not stop there, and he will not really let this girl go. He just doesn't like women's violent resistance. There are at least 5 girls who died because of his words, otherwise he wouldn't be called a mad dog. Help me hold her hand. I don't want her to scratch me in a while. Harry smiled lewdly as he took off his pants. He was already impatient to enjoy this beautiful girl. Plop, plop, the sound of 2 heavy objects falling to the ground sounded beside him. Those were 2 of his subordinates. Now they both had a pale short spear stuck in their foreheads, and they probably couldn't do anything for him. Oh hell, seeing the miserable situation of his men, Harry squatted down immediately. A bone spear flew over his head whistling and pierced deeply into the wall. I have to say, because there are too many superheroes in this world, and the criminals are much smarter than those on Earth, Harry immediately hid behind the girl, took out a pistol and pointed it at the girl's head. Shout. Who is it? Come out. Do you really want to see me? A man in a hoodie slowly walked out of the shadows at the end of the alley. Under the dim light, Harry and the girl in front of him saw the man's face, a pale skull mask. Okay, I'm coming out, what do you want? Kane spread his hands. These days he has caused troubles for those villains, and he has accumulated a lot of spirits while fighting crimes, which also makes him he has the confidence to face the gun directly. Looking at Kane's terrifying mask, the mad dog Harry couldn't help swallowing, and pointed his gun at the girl's solar system and said, "Hey, man, I don't want to cause trouble, I'm just an ordinary person, you can send it to prison, but if you plan to kill me, I will definitely drag this girl to die with me." Ordinary people, hee, ordinary people will be haunted by vengeful spirits. Let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 vengeful spirits. Mr. Ordinary People, there are quite a few people who died directly in your hands. I'm just following orders. The orders to kill are all given by the bosses above. Dude, you can tell that I'm just a low-level errand runner. The real culprits are those big shots. After listening to Kane's words, Harry he was even more scared. Obviously what he met was a legendary superhero. He just begged the other party not to kill him. He didn't care about going to jail or anything. Really, I just want a word from you now. As long as you let me go, I just let this girl go. Look, she is still so young, she shouldn't die with a piece of trash like me. What you said makes sense. Kane turned his head and thought for a while, and just as Harry was igniting hope, a word came from behind the mask, aging. Without seeing any movement of the skull face, Harry felt that all the strength in his body suddenly disappeared. The gun in his hand seemed to weigh several tons, and the hand holding the gun slipped from the girl's face. At the same time, his body also instantly limp against the wall, and he didn't even have the strength to move his fingers. Seeing that the girl was fine, Kane stopped talking nonsense, and directly stretched out his hand to start siphoning life on Harry and the others. The girl froze to the side and watched the three fools shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. She couldn't even tell, although this man had saved her just now, but the terrible mask and the current evil spell made her feel more scared than before. "Miss, this is your bag." Kane picked up the bag from the ground and handed it to the girl, but the girl took a step back reflexively. Kane sighed and put the bag in front of her and turned to leave. The three guys didn't want to get gratitude and praise, but the girl's hellish expression still made him a little uncomfortable. He was only 20 years old, and he was still hoping to be recognized by others. "Well, thank you, sir." Seeing that Kane was about to walk out of the alley, the girl finally said thank you in a weak voice. Kane stopped when he heard the words, and waved his hands without looking back. "It's nothing, try to go out at night as little as possible, and pay attention to safety. By the way, if someone asks, my name is Death Whisperer, don't tell them my name's Skullface or Skeleton or something. This is the result of his labor in the past few days." Originally, he thought that the rescued people would come up with some cool nicknames, but Kane didn't consider his shape and spell effects at all, and the ones that spread and appeared in the newspapers turned out to be skeletons. Face, this makes Kane quite speechless. This kind of nickname that doesn't seem to survive 3 episodes can't even be taken by a decent villain. Kane, who came up with a better nickname, had to choose the last rank of Rathma priest as his nickname. After all, he is the only Rathma priest in the Marvel world. It is very possible to become a Death Whisperer in this world, but it is not considered a transcendence. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, several gunshots were heard in the distance, and Kane suddenly raised his head, and after distinguishing the direction, he hurried to the direction of the gunshots. After being nourished by the soul, Kane's body is much stronger than when he first came. This kind of strengthening is comprehensive. Regardless of strength, agility, and the perception of various organs, he has already surpassed ordinary people. Within a few minutes, he ran to the place where the gunshots sounded. Kane found himself just in time, as a black man pointed a gun at Frank the Punisher and yelled, "Hold on, you're under arrest." Senescence. When Frank was about to fight back, he found that the black man had fallen to the ground, and a guy wearing a skull mask was running towards him in the distance. "Stand there, why is it you?" Kane took off the mask when Frank pointed his gun at the skull face, and put it on again after Frank saw his appearance clearly. "Although his body has strengthened, I don't want to be shot to see if I'm bulletproof. I rushed over when I heard the gunshots, but I didn't expect to run into you." Kane walked over, looked at the black man on the ground and asked Frank, "Who is he, are you injured?" No, I just fired the shot." Frank dug out a piece of ID from the black man's clothes, and when he opened it, it was an FBI ID with a photo of the black man on it. Frank frowned, looked up and asked Kane, "Will he die?" Kane also saw the certificate, thankful that he didn't use the bone spear just now. "No, no, it's just a curse, he will get better after time passes, about a minute or so." Frank heaved a sigh of relief, stuffed the ID into the black man's clothes, bowed his head and said to him, "Billy Russo is going to Donald Lee's house, we must rush there immediately." The black detective didn't even have the strength to speak, so he could only watch the two of them leave. "Who is Billy Russo?" Kane asked while sitting in the co-pilot. He remembered that the family member of the detective he saw at the cemetery was named Donald Lee, and when he saw Frank driving the car like an angry bull, he ran countless red lights on the road, and he knew that Billy was not a kind person. "Remember the night you met me? I was Agent Donald Lee who accidentally killed Billy Russo when he was undercover next to Billy and I thought he was just a gangster and shot him. Wait, you mean that handsome Billy isn't dead?" Kane asked suspiciously. He didn't remember that the Punisher had the habit of keeping alive, and he said that he sent Billy to the glass smasher. "I threw him into the glass smasher, but at that time the FBI came in, I could only go one step ahead, I thought he was dead, but yesterday my informant told me he was not dead, and changed it his name is Jigsaw. I just asked his subordinates about his whereabouts. He is now rushing to Donald Lee's house to find his money, because Donald Lee was in charge of managing their gang's funds when he was alive. I hope we don't go there soon. It's late." While talking about Frank, he stepped on the gas pedal again, and Kane stopped talking, quietly praying for the mother and daughter. Kane and Frank rushed to Donald Lee's house at the first time, but they were still late. The whole house was turned into a mess, and 2 policemen died here. One of them had a note stuck in his chest with a kitchen knife. "The Punisher, if they want their mother and daughter to live, they can bring the money to the Brad Avenue Hotel in 3 days to exchange it." Watching Frank crumble the note, Kane also patted him on the shoulder with a cold face. "I don't think you mind if I go with you." "Yes, but we have to prepare." Frank's eyes were cold. Kane followed Frank to his home, which was an abandoned sewer hub. No sewage flowed here, and the large space was almost turned into a military base by Frank, with all kinds of ammunition manufacturing machine tools all over the place. All kinds of firearms were also hung on the wall, and Kane even saw a rocket launcher on it. "Are you going to arm an army?" Kane sighed while touching the gun. He was also a little hot-eyed. Boys are generally interested in guns. Compared to an assault rifle of that caliber, it was like a toy. Frank smiled seeing Kane's infatuation. Although this big boy has white hair and is proficient in strange spells, his behavior still reveals his age to the eyes of old fritters like Frank. Looking at him, Frank, it was like seeing a little brother. Such a big boy reminded him of the recruits he met when he was still in the Navy SEALs. Next, Frank picked up a revolver in his hand and threw it to Kane, pointing to a target paper on the wall. .357 caliber Colt Python, high power pistol, try your marksmanship, don't worry gunshots, the walls here are thick enough. Wow, this is a good guy. Kane took the gun and couldn't wait to aim at the target paper and shot out all 6 bullets in one breath. The basement fell into silence. Frank looked at the clean and new target paper and thought he was dazzled, but the 6 small holes on the wall next to him made him confirm that his pistol was indeed filled with live ammunition. "Ah, Frank, do you still have bullets?" Kane asked awkwardly. "It's okay, don't worry about it, the Python has too much recoil, it's normal to miss." Frank simply took a box of ammunition and walked over, handing it to Kane. "Beginners don't need to shoot so fast, aim and then fire." Quote. After some guidance from Frank, Kane's marksmanship has improved a lot. Well, finally all 6 bullets hit the target, but there is still a distance from the bullseye. "It's okay, marksmanship is not so easy to practice, even I have to shoot thousands of bullets to ensure that the gun hits the bullseye." Frank comforted Kane. Of course he did not say that his gun hit the bullseye refers to 500 meters distance. It shouldn't be. Kane depressedly stretched out his hand and summoned a bone spear, which accurately penetrated the bull's eye. Frank could only attribute this to the big difference between the aiming methods of magic and marksmanship. Frank was worthy of being the former Navy SEAL commander. Although he was very worried about the safety of Donald Lee's mother and daughter, he still did not attack rashly. Instead, he spent 2 days investigating the environment. The Brad Street Hotel is an abandoned hotel that has long been empty and has been reduced to a den of drug addicts and homeless people. Jigsaw Billy has taken over without any hindrance. Later, he relied on his previous status to lobby many gangsters to help get rid of Frank. After all, the Punisher has a good reputation. These guys with lives in their hands are worried that one day they will eat his gun. Build a trap and they'll be happy to join this Punisher party. In 3 days, the gangsters who arrived one after another turned the hotel into a war fortress. The windows were boarded up to prevent snipers, and trenches were piled up with tables and chairs in each corridor. In order to kill Frank, these gangsters all went down. They brought money, all kinds of light and heavy weapons, everyone had at least 2 guns, and at least 200 gangsters gathered in the hotel. After finding out the enemy's situation, Frank began to make targeted arrangements. He had to prepare enough firearms and ammunition. He also replaced the body armor with heavy-duty ones. Kane didn't ask for his body armor. Compared with him, he believed in his own bone armor, he didn't bring a gun either. With his current aim, let alone hitting the enemy, it would be bad if he accidentally injured Frank. It was late at night, and there was a knock on the big iron door of the Black Street Hotel. Bang bang bang. More than a dozen guns were pointed at the door from the inside of the hotel, and there were still people knocking on the door at such a late hour. It was still this apparently deserted hotel. The gangsters guarding the main entrance of the hotel were vigilantly hiding behind the bunker and aimed at the door. Bang bang bang. The door was knocked 3 more times, and the little boss hiding behind the pillar winked at the subordinate next to him. The bald man had no choice but to walk to the door and ask, "Who is it?" "Come to the Punisher party." The little boss frowned. Tomorrow is the appointed time, why did someone arrive now? But only the people on the road knew about this action, so he nodded at the bald head and motioned him to see who it was. The bald head opened the small window on the iron door, and what came into view was a man in a hoodie, and he seemed to be the only one outside the door. Hearing the sound of the window opening, the man raised his head and appeared in the bald head. What was in front of him was a pale skull, and before he could cry out, a bone spear sank deeply into his forehead. There was a loud bang, and with a flash of white light, a huge scythe split the iron gate of the hotel and the bald man into 2, and then Kane, holding the scythe, rushed in while taking advantage of the smoke falling from the iron gate. After leaving the hotel, he scanned the hall with his spirit eyes. All the gangsters had nowhere to hide. Their souls were like lights in the night, and Kane saw them clearly. At the same time, their souls, the strong blood-stained breath was also seen by Kane. "It seems that you are carrying blood debts, now I don't have to tell who deserves to die. Fire." The little boss didn't have time to listen to him, and when he saw his subordinates dead, he immediately gave the command to fire. There was a loud gunshot, and bullets of various sizes hit Kane, and quickly tore the black hoodie he was wearing. However, the blood splatter that the gangsters were expecting did not appear. Bone debris. Kane once experimented with Frank at the secret base. The bone armor he summoned can block the shooting of automatic rifles. Only anti-material weapons or rockets can pose a threat to him, but obviously the gangsters here will not prepare with such weapons, they will be buried with this dangerous building. The intense gunshots spread to the street next door. A patrol car heard the gunshots and hurriedly turned its head and rushed there, but was stopped by a black car in the street after not driving too far. A man in a black suit and sunglasses approached them. After showing a certificate and saying a few words, they turned around and left, and the man looked back in the direction of the hotel, shook his head helplessly and continued his blocking work. "The main gate is under attack, the main entrance is under attack, you sons of a fool, come down and help." Amidst the gunshots, the little leader of the gatekeeper yelled into the intercom. "Calm down, what happened on the first floor?" Jigsaw's voice came from the walkie-talkie. After all, he was considered the #1 boss in New York City. Hearing his voice, the little boss didn't dare to curse anymore. A monster came in at the main gate. He was wearing bulletproof armor. He also had a scythe that could break through the iron gate. Hell, he could throw a short spear. "I've already killed half of my men." "Okay, I see. The reinforcements will go down immediately. Hold on." Jigsaw turned off the walkie-talkie and turned around twice. An angry expression appeared on his face that was scratched beyond recognition by the glass, and he smashed the walkie-talkie. Why didn't the Punisher come, but a monster came instead? Hee hee, it doesn't matter. The more you come, the better. If you want me to help you solve him, just pay an extra fee. There was a playful laugh from the shadow behind the puzzle, and a black figure lay beside on the sofa. No, thank you, my people will take care of him, you just wait here for the Punisher. Sombra's words made Jigsaw calm down. Although this guy who collects money has a good reputation, his asking price is too high. It's high. What Jiju lacks now is money. If this guy kills 2 people, then I'm afraid there won't be much left. Jigsaw picked up another walkie-talkie and ordered, brothers on the 2nd and 3rd floors go to the 1st floor to support, and the others stay still to prevent sneak attacks. Putting down the jigsaw puzzle on the walkie-talkie, I saw the mother and daughter of Donald Lee, who were tied to the side, walked over with a smile, and picked Mrs. Donald Lee's chin with a pistol. Unexpectedly, you have many lovers outside, and your husband works under my hands. You brought people home a lot when you were here, didn't you? Anyone with a conscience will come to attack you, a villain. Although she was afraid, Mrs. Donald Lee said righteously. Since her husband died, she has become a lot stronger, because he knows that she must shoulder his husband's responsibility to take care of their daughters, and cowardice will not save them. Conscience. Ha ha ha, ma'am, you are so naive and cute. Do you think why I was released? Is it because I am innocent? Of course not. It is because I exchanged important information with the FBI for freedom. Look, this is the conscience you rely on. In the face of their official positions and justice, they chose the former. Jigsaw laughed loudly. Since his disfigurement, his spirit has become more and more abnormal, and the top floor hall has been filled with high explosive explosions. Later, if the situation is not good, he will activate them and let the Punisher be buried with the people in this building. As for himself, a ropeway connecting the building next door has already been arranged on the roof. At this moment, with a crackling sound, a thick black figure broke through the stairwell window between the 3rd and 4th floors of the hotel and invaded the hotel. The huge white skull on his chest revealed his identity. He is the puzzle-waiting tonight man, Frank the Punisher. After countless training by the state violent machine and the continuous fighting on the streets of New York in the past few years, Frank has already become the top part of human beings in combat. The unlucky guy was shot in the head and fell into a pool of blood. Frank didn't hesitate at all. While moving quickly against the wall, he pulled out the safety catch of a grenade with one hand and threw it into the room where the two walked out. There was a loud bang, and the silence was restored inside, but the noise also alarmed the gangsters on the entire floor. Thugs with guns swarmed out of the room, and one after another fell into a pool of blood. Frank, who had been investigating for 2 days, was fully prepared. Even enemies can't tell if he's out of bullets. After firing the rifle, use the submachine gun, and after the submachine gun, use the pistol. In just 5 minutes, he cleaned up the entire lair, and then quickly replaced the weapon on his body with a new magazine. There was no one left alive, and countless corpses fell into a pool of blood. Compared with Frank's artistic fighting style, Kane's is much rougher. The gangsters on the 2nd and 3rd floors finally ran downstairs. After being reminded by the puzzle, most of them carried powerful weapons such as assault rifles and shotguns. Although the bulletproof effect of the bone armor was good, the large number of bullets brought the same stopping effect made it difficult for Kane to move, and it also weakened his bone armor a lot, so he could only temporarily hide behind a stone pillar. These experienced gangsters didn't stop. They continued to pour firepower at the stone pillar until half of the pillar was cut off before stopping to change the clips. Tisk tisk tisk, more wins in front of Priest Rathma, you should clean up the corpses on the ground first. Kane's words came from behind the stone pillar, which made the little boss at the beginning have an ominous premonition. He looked at the corpse on the ground in horror. Blast. Probably people will awaken some abilities before they die, and the little boss felt that he had awakened the ability to slow time, because as Kane uttered the spell, the corpses lying on the ground swelled like balloons in his eyes. When he got up, he clearly and slowly saw that the corpses swelled to the limit, and then shattered. The huge shock wave blasted the people around the corpses into the air, and the bones in the corpses flew around like shrapnel. The little boss felt that the power of the grenade explosion was just that. Along with his last thought in this life, a broken rib went through his heart and nailed him to the wall. The scariest thing about corpse explosions is that as long as the first explosion causes death and the necromancer still has spirits, the explosions will continue until all the corpses are gone. Of course, Kane would not be so wasteful. In fact, when he detonated the 10th corpse, there were no more people alive on this floor, but for the sake of safety, he detonated 3 more corpses. After all, this is the world of Marvel. Who knows if any supervillain will be able to escape his spirit eyes. Gala, gala. With the sound of bones colliding, 5 white bones stood up on the bloody Shira field. They held bone swords and surrounded Kane. They were Kane's skeleton warriors. Through the battle just now, he knew the spell he wasn't invincible, and excessive output would also pose a threat to his life, so he cautiously summoned a few skeleton warriors and replenished his bone armor. After absorbing the spirit, Kane also ran upstairs immediately. He was forced to dodge temporarily even though he possessed spells. I am afraid that Frank will have more difficulties. At this time, I believe that he needs his help very much. Chapter 11. Kane ran up all the way, followed by his skeleton brothers. It has to be said that Frank's killing efficiency is much higher than him. Although he doesn't have any supernatural powers, he single-handedly killed 2 gangsters, and most of them were killed by 1 shot. The spirit that filled the road made Kane very happy. It seemed that following Frank was the most correct choice for him. The gains from this trip were much more than that of working alone for a month. Arrived at the lobby on the top floor without hindrance, Kane was stunned as soon as he opened the door and entered. In the wide hall, only a disfigured man in a white suit sitting on the sofa at the far end was drinking, and there was a man tied to the sofa beside the sofa. The mother and daughter of Donald Lee, but Frank has disappeared. Are you that monster? Jigsaw was also surprised when he saw Kane with the skeleton warrior. Unexpectedly, so many people didn't stop this guy. It seems that this is another superhero. Wow, Jigsaw broke the wine glass in his hand, and said in a deep voice, add another money, and kill him too. Plop, before Kane figured out who he was talking to, a black figure jumped out from the side and threw him behind the pillar by the door, and a playing card flew out from nowhere. After passing his throat just now, he cut off the head of a skeleton warrior. The black shadow who threw Kane down was Frank the Punisher. In just a few seconds, the heads of 3 more skeleton warriors were cut off by poker, and the last skeleton warrior was also pulled back behind the pillar. Kane couldn't help but be a little surprised. Even if these skeleton warriors are the products of his temporary summoning, this hidden enemy is too powerful. The only weakness of these skeleton warriors is the unprotected spine, but they can be accurate with a single playing card. I am afraid that it is not ordinary people who cut them off. Who is this? Bullseye, a professional killer who only cares about money, the chief assassin of New York City crime boss Jin Bin. Sorry, I have a problem with my intelligence, I didn't find out that he is here too. Mutant, how could I kill my skeleton warrior with poker? Kane found that his previous cognition was somewhat different from this world. Bullseye was the enemy of Daredevil in the comics of that world, and he was just an ordinary person. Possessing accurate projection ability and close combat skills, but this does not mean that he can kill the skeleton warrior with poker. You must know that although the skeleton of the skeleton warrior looks thin, it is actually blessed by the spirit, and ordinary bullets cannot attack it. How could the paper poker be cut off casually? I don't know. In fact, no one even knows his real name, and no one knows whether he is a mutant. They only know that he can accurately hit all the objects he wants to hit. Frank said in a deep voice. At this time, Cayenne discovered that there was a deep scratch on the neck guard of Frank's heavy combat uniform, and he could even see his neck through the scratch. No wonder Frank was so afraid of Bullseye. GG, today is a good day to make money. I didn't expect to get another 100 million so easily. Come on, little skull, although you are only a superhero who just appeared recently, I originally wanted to wait for you to grow up for a while, but who let you successfully anger my benefactor, I can only be forced to kill you. Come out quickly, I promise it will not hurt, just let my poker lightly across yours just the neck. A frivolous voice came, and Kane heard that Bullseye was hidden behind a stone pillar next to Jigsaw, and he hadn't mastered tracking spells yet, but he didn't give up, but looked at it. Thinking about the environment of the entire hall, he began to think about ways to kill Bullseye. Seeing that Frank and Kane did not come out from behind the pillar, Jigsaw became impatient at first. He didn't spend $200 million to watch them play peek-a-boo. Jigsaw pulled out a pistol and put it on the little girl's head, shouting, "Frank, come out, I have enough chips here, and I will let the mother and daughter go if you two come out from behind the pillar, 2 for 2. Well, it's fair, isn't it? Frank was about to walk out of the stone pillar without hesitation, but Kane held him back. I'll go out first, I have a bone armor on my body, and I can resist a little bit. You find a chance to kill Jigsaw. No, this is my business, and I would be very grateful if you could help me get here. Okay, stop talking nonsense, Frank. The puzzle is talking about 2 people, so I must go out, but I don't think he will abide by the agreement. This kind of inhuman fool can't believe a word, so we must kill him. As for the bullseye, I will attract it. As long as we kill the puzzle, we will be safe, and I believe that a hired killer is not interested in doing a job that does not get paid. Even Frank, who has dealt with gangs for many years, has to admit that Kane's words are very reasonable. These fools have no bottom line, but no one with a little conscience can become the boss. Only by killing Jigsaw can the mother and daughter be rescued, so, Kane's plan is the only feasible way. Why don't you come out? It seems that you are not so great, then I will kill this little one first. Wait, we're coming out. After speaking, Kane walked out. In order to attract Bullseye, he even removed most of the bone armor on his body, and walked out with only a mask on. Whoosh, a poker card stuck in Kane's throat, causing him to fall on his back. At the same moment, Frank came out from the other side of the stone pillar and fired a shot. Frank didn't waste the shot that Kane bought for him with his life. His self-made high-power rifle bullet passed through the entire hull and hit Jigsaw's forehead accurately. The kinetic energy brought by the bullet shattered his brain immediately, and the central nervous system, so that he can no longer pull the trigger, he can only turn into a corpse and fall on his back. Whoosh, another card flew over. Fortunately, Frank didn't trust Bullseye's character too much, so he retracted in time, which also made him miss for the first time tonight. Bullseye, Jigsaw is dead, no one will pay you, why don't you leave? Frank hid behind the pillar and said loudly, he is not a man who knows how to adapt. The purpose of tonight is to rescue the Donald Lee mother and daughter. It's not about dealing with Bullseye, so he plans to persuade this guy who only recognizes money to leave. No, Frank, you are wrong. Your brain is very valuable. Do you think you can hire me just for puzzles? Let me tell you the truth. In fact, the big boss Jin Bing paid me to kill you. After all, such an opportunity is rare. Bullseye, who was hiding behind the stone pillar, laughed jokingly. Come out, Frank, you know I'm not the same as Jigsaw's idiot, who traded your life for the lives of the mother and daughter. If you do what you say, no one will pay for the lives of their mother and daughter, don't worry. Bullseye observed the stone pillar where Frank was hiding through a small mirror attached to the wall, and he was sure to kill him when he came out again, and he believed that Frank would come out. After all, Jigsaw said before that it was Frank killed the relatives of the mother and daughter, and this was his fatal wound. Just when he focused all his attention on Frank, something quietly approached the helpless mother and daughter on the ground from the window. Ah! Screams came from the mouths of the Donately mother and daughter. They can't be blamed for this. No matter who was suddenly pulled out of the window, they would be at a loss. A white spider thread pulled them up to the roof. A man in a red and blue bodysuit caught them with both hands. Hey ladies, I'm so sorry to scare you. Next time I'll find a way to do it in a more secure way. Spider-Man. The little girl was pleasantly surprised to recognize this snarky superhero. Spider-Man is indeed the most popular among children among all the heroes. His temperament, like the big brother next door, is loved by all age groups, favorite of the people. Oh, beautiful lady, what are your orders? Spider-Man also knelt down and looked directly at the little girl. Well, can you help Uncle Punisher? Those bad guys are very powerful, I'm afraid he will be in danger. Ah, Spider-Man scratched his head in embarrassment. To be honest, he doesn't like the Punisher very much, because his style of using violence to control violence is very different from his own, but the Punisher is indeed fighting crime, so Spider-Man generally turns a blind eye. Come and treat him, but looking at the expectant eyes of the little girl, he really couldn't refuse. Yes, Mr. Spider-Man, the Punisher is in danger because of us, I hope you can help him. The girl's mother also spoke, and unlike the little girl, she could tell, whether it was the Punisher, it was still the skeleton man who fell on the ground and died. They were all risking their lives to save their mother and daughter. With the addition of Spider-Man, their chances of survival must be greater. Okay, Okay, then you stay here and don't move, I'll be right back. As he said that, Spider-Man swung into the hall on the top floor through the window, but what greeted him was a handful of poker thrown by Bullseye. Spider-Man, who had nowhere to hide, had to dodge the poker with a back roll, but this action also prevented him from to enter the hall. It can only be posted on the outer wall. Hey, Spider-Man, I know you're coming. Well, I can't deal with two superheroes, that's fine, I give up this mission, how about you two letting me go? Bullseye loudly said. Oh, the style of bullying and fearing the heart is very similar to what criminals should have. I know that there are many gentlemen with similar characteristics in the island prison. I think I'd better introduce them for you. I think you will have a lot in common. We've been chatting inside for hundreds of years. Although Spider-Man never kills, it doesn't mean he will spare criminals, especially guys with special abilities like Bullseye, who can cause much more damage than ordinary gangsters. HMPH, Spider-Man, don't think you've got me. This place has been covered with puzzles and bombs, and the remote control is in my hand. Just now you seemed to put the mother and daughter on the roof. Guess what? Guess if I press the remote, the two of them will be fine. Hearing what Bullseye said, Frank was startled, and quickly looked around, and sure enough, he saw a remote control bomb with red light flashing in a hidden place such as the bottom of the table. He was afraid that Spider-Man would be impulsive, so he hurriedly shouted, Spider-Man, don't mess around, this place is indeed full of bombs. Why do criminals always get a lot of explosives? Spider-Man's annoyed voice came from outside the window. Haha, that's because we are rich. Are you interested in changing careers? I believe you can make a lot of money with your skills. Bullseye laughed loudly. It was obvious that the Punisher and Spider-Man had already cast a trap, and he left safely. The possibility is also increasing. Okay, today is really a wonderful night. Although I lost a lot of money, it is also a good thing to be able to chat with two superheroes under the moonlight. Then, see you again gone. Aging. Just as Bullseye was about to jump out of the window, a mutation happened. Kane, who was lying on the ground, suddenly sat up and released the aging curse on Bullseye. Although Bullseye has supernatural powers, he is still a human being. The curse of aging caused his strength to drain rapidly, but he is stronger than ordinary people after all. The remaining strength supported him to press the remote control in his hand. No, Frank raised the rifle in his hand, but the Bullseye was very alert. There was a broken door between the window he escaped from and Frank, which just blocked his shooting angle. Spider-Man didn't have time to touch the remote control with his spider silk. At this moment of life and death, a cold light flashed in the slanting stab, and a pale long sword accurately cut off Bullseye's hand holding the remote control. It was Kane's only remaining skeleton warrior. After being knocked down, the skeleton warrior wandered around in a disordered state. Originally, Bullseye had put some energy on it, but when it hit a pillar twice and was overturned by a chair, I didn't care about it after I tripped. Who knows that all this is an illusion caused by Kane controlling the skeleton warrior? He confuses Bullseye in this way, and slowly moves the skeleton warrior to Bullseye's side. The Bullseye of the broken hand was aroused fiercely. He threw out a card and cut off the skeleton warrior's head, then turned over and grabbed the remote control on the ground. He no longer planned to escape. At this point, I want to die with the Punisher and Kane. Hey, don't be impulsive. This time Spider-Man finally had enough time to react. He immediately sprayed out spider silk and stuck Bullseye to the ground, stopping his actions. Look, you just broke your arm, it won't affect your life in prison too much. Corpse Spear. Just as Spider-Man was chattering with Bullseye, Kane uttered another spell. As soon as the words fell, 3 bone spurs drilled out from the corpse of the jigsaw puzzle beside him, piercing fiercely into Bullseye's head. Oh, you devil, he can't resist anymore, why do you still want to kill him? After confirming that Bullseye was dead, Spider-Man was furious. He yelled at Kane, and at the same time raised his hands. It seemed that as long as Kane's answer did not satisfy him, he would attack him. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Kane pulled a poker from his throat. This is the one that Bullseye shot at him just now. Bone armor, I am afraid that he is the one who died now. Kane, who was still in fear, recalled the feeling of his death before, and killed Bullseye without hesitation. You are a fool just like the Punisher. His life and death and guilt should be judged by the federal government instead of allowing you to abuse the death penalty. What is the difference between you and them using violence like this? You two should also go to the island prison. Hey, Spider-Man, he deserved his death. As far as I know, at least 3 judges' deaths were directly related to him, and the reason he shot it was only because the 3 gang bosses paid enough money. Frank also he raised his rifle and pointed it at Spider-Man. Kane's behavior was very appetizing to him, and he also reminded him of his former comrades in arms by coming forward before. Now it is not too much to say that they are life and death friends. That's not an excuse for your abuse of lynching. No one can decide the guilt of others except the court. Really, the ordinary people who died at their hands deserved it. If I didn't have a little magical protection, I would be a corpse now, and all I can get is a sentence from the police to express my deep regret. Cayenne also stood up from the ground, looked directly at Spider-Man and said. His personal experience told him that the lives of ordinary people are fragile in front of these criminals, and they may lose their lives just because of some trivial things, and how much they expect a superhero to appear to save themselves at that helpless time. But now that he has been reborn and has some magical abilities that ordinary people cannot have, his first thought is to become the kind of superhero he expected. It is indeed difficult to protect people's lives anytime and anywhere, but Kane feels that he can at least not let any guilty person go. The bloody smell lingering on Bullseye's soul is stronger than that of any gangster downstairs. That's why Kane didn't hesitate to offend Spider-Man and spare his life. He kept in mind a sentence his parents taught him in Chinese. Get rid of all evil, and if you survive with Bullseye, you don't know how many people will die in his hands in the future. Where? Seeing that the 2 people in front of him could not be persuaded, Spider-Man also had the intention of retreating, but before he left, he still left a sentence. Your behavior is slowly approaching the criminals who died in your hands. One day you will become like them, and at that time, I will definitely bring you to justice. Don't take the mother and daughter with you when you leave. Moving at high speed is not good for the child's cervical spine. Frank's answer made Spider-Man almost fall down the stairs. The ashamed and indignant Spider-Man still listened to his words and swung away by himself. Frank also put away his rifle and began to dismantle the bombs. Although the Bullseye was dead and the remote control was in their hands, if something went wrong with any bomb, but it's troublesome, so he thinks it's safer to dismantle them all. Frank, give these bombs to me. You take the mother and daughter home first. Kane said suddenly. They have been terrified for several days and need a good rest. You can also defuse bombs. Frank really didn't know that Kane could also have this skill. I'll at least call the police. Don't the police have a bomb disposal unit? Kane said with a smile, picking up the remote control and Jigsaw's mobile phone from the ground. Okay. Frank thought for a while, but didn't refuse Kane's kindness, and went up the stairs to find the mother and daughter. The 3 went downstairs, and Kane was still watching the bomb. Frank nodded at him and led the people downstairs. Before leaving, the little girl smiled at him to express his gratitude, and Kane also rushed. She waved her hand and watched them leave. Frank drove towards home with the mother and daughter. The man in the black suit on the side of the road watched them leave, then picked up the phone and dialed a number. Sir, Frank took the mother and daughter and left. Yes, he's alone. Well, I'll keep a close eye on the Death Whisperers. At this moment, Kane was facing Bullseye's corpse, and a hot feeling emanated from his chest. This feeling had been there since just now, and this was the reason why he pushed Frank away, because this heat was automatically mobilizing his body. This is a situation he has never encountered, and even Rathma has never told him about this phenomenon. Sting. He tore off the t-shirt on his chest, and found that his chest was emitting golden light. The pattern that once appeared on his soul chest reappeared. It was it that was emitting light and heat, and it was gathering the power of the soul in his body. Also this pattern. Kane carefully sensed the flow of the spirits in the body, and found that they were running the spell of resurrecting the puppet, which surprised Kane. The resurrection of puppets is one of the unique spells of Rathma priests. It is a spell for Rathma priests to communicate with powerful heroic spirits and bring them back to reality. Of course, the price is to fight for Rathma priests. These puppets, they will change their attributes according to the sacrifices used for summoning. Coupled with the characteristics of no fear of death and the fighting skills of powerful heroes, they will display great combat effectiveness, which is not the same as the skeleton warrior. Kane had mastered this spell a few days ago, but for some reason, he failed many experiments on the corpse, because no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't communicate with the heroic spirits that Rathma said. He thought it was because of the space barrier that he couldn't use this powerful spell, but he didn't expect that the spell would activate by itself tonight. Looking at the hot badge on his chest, Kane decided not to prevent it from continuing to function. After all, this is a treasure left by his grandfather, and he can travel through the world with his soul to see what it can do. The spirit ran through Kane's body according to the trajectory of the resurrection puppet technique, and then drilled out with the badge as a seal, and went straight to Bullseye's corpse. It is amazing. Somehow, this strand should have been green. The gray spirit power was turned into gold by the badge, and after melting into Bullseye's corpse, it also dyed the entire corpse into gold. The originally burly Bullseye was constantly changing under the transformation of the golden spirit. About 1 minute later, the golden light gradually dissipated, and a tall woman with slender arms stood up, which was different from the flesh and blood puppet Kane recognized. This time, no matter how you look at it, it looks like a living person. Relying on the resurrection of Bullseye's corpse, the woman has nothing in common with Bullseye. She has long golden hair combed into long braids and hangs behind her head. Kane couldn't help but look at the towering twin peaks. She is dressed in black. The tight leather armor covered her torso, and the exposed muscles of her limbs made it clear that she was definitely not a vase. The woman opened her eyes, and a flash of light flashed across her eyes. With sharp eyes, she immediately spotted Kane. The woman walked up to Kane in a few steps. She was about 1.8 meters tall and looked straight at Kane and asked, "Hello, Nephilim, my name is Morina. I am very glad to be able to come back to the world and stand side by side with you. Fight." The soul integrity of this heroic spirit is so high. Kane was even more surprised when he heard the woman speak. The normal flesh and blood puppets would only incorporate part of the heroic spirit's intuition and combat skills due to spells. The body is more normal, and the speaking voice is also unusually clear, and the enunciation is clear, obviously retaining most of the memories, which is really rare enough. Just thinking of this, Kane was stunned suddenly. She asked her name, Morina. This name awakened his long-sealed memory. In addition, the revived puppet was a summoning spirit, and he had an incredible premonition. "Miss Morina, nice to meet you. Since you know Nephilim, you must be a hero from Sanctuary. Where have I heard your name?" Kane asked. "When he played Diablo, I have also consulted some information, and I have the impression that this name appeared there." Morina showed a look of hesitation, but she still answered, "Not many people know about my life experience. I'm afraid you knew my name from the time I was resurrected for the first time. My name at that time, it's called the Blood Raven." It turned out to be a blood crow. Kane showed a look of surprise. This name is something that all Diablo players will never forget. It is the first boss with its own story in Diablo 2, and it is more or less for the first time to contact that game. The players have caused a lot of trouble. "Ah, so where did Miss Morina come back from this time?" Kane thought for a while, but decided to ask clearly. Her first resurrection was because her soul was corrupted by the power of hell, has been freed from evil. Valadani's Hall of Valor. This question was not so embarrassing for Blood Crow, and she answered immediately. Valadani's Hall of Valor. Kane was stunned. Rathma did say that the imprint on his chest was the symbol of Vatican, and that Vatican was the birthplace of monks in Nephilim. On the mysterious eastern continent, the sanctuary of Shansai, their mysterious veil was not revealed until Diablo 3. Kane really didn't know much about them. That's right, Van Rodani, the Holy See located in the holy city of Eglod in the snow-capped mountains. They believe in everything in the world as gods, and they also believe that they can become true messengers of the gods after undergoing spiritual and physical tests. They believe that after becoming the messenger of all gods, the soul will be immortal, so a Hall of Valor was built there to summon lost souls. After detailed questioning and Morina's answering questions, Kane finally figured out how this happened thing. It turns out that the Valardani's Hall of Valor does have the ability to attract souls, but it doesn't just absorb the souls of the messengers of the gods like the monks imagined. In fact, the Hall of Valor absorbs the souls of Nephilim. Morina also has part of Nephilim's blood, so after being killed, her soul did not dissipate but instead entered the Valardani's Hall of Valor. As more and more heroic spirits settled in, Van Rodani also discovered this, but they couldn't tear down the Hall of Valor. After all, many real monk heroes were also Nephilim. Moreover, the Hall of Valor is an important inheritance place for Van Rodani. The monks who are really strong enough to become a teacher will come here to receive the infusion of power and the mark of the soul, but Nephilim of other professions can't put their own. The power was poured into the monks. In order to prevent these spirits from wandering for a long time, they would have other ideas. In the end, they thought of a compromise and found a way to create a batch of amulets. Heroic spirits of other professions can pass this amulet, infuse power into their favorite inheritors, and use their bodies to experience rebirth again. The badge that Cain once wore was the amulet of Van Rodani, but for some reason it was directly imprinted on his soul, and he came to the Marvel world with his soul. So, you don't know why you came out of the Hall of Valor and became a flesh and blood puppet? Cain scratched his head. It's a direct resurrection. Why is it different from what was said? Yes, I just perceived a body that is very suitable for shooting. I don't know why I was resurrected directly after coming out of the Hall of Valor. Morina didn't seem to know much. Okay, then, Miss Morina, this time may be very different from the world of the sanctuary. You can go back with me first, and I will teach you some things slowly. Okay, a lot of the words I got from you don't quite understand the specific meaning. Can you know what I'm thinking? Cain asked curiously. Yes, and I feel a bond with you. I don't know what it is, but it seems that I can communicate with you in my heart. Morina didn't open her mouth this time, but her voice was still clear. Appeared in Cain's mind. Telepathy. My God, what's going on? Cain was extremely surprised. Rathma's inheritance didn't say that they had mastered magic like telepathy. At most, they controlled themselves remotely in their hearts. Puppets and skeleton warriors are all that matters. Wait a minute, isn't Morina's resurrection the real resurrection of the dead, but another form of puppet resurrection? I'm afraid that's the case. I feel that there is indeed an invisible restriction that prevents me from attacking you. Morina also replied in her heart. Attack me? I didn't do anything. Cain was a little speechless. It seems that the blood crow is a blood crow. Even after being resurrected, his personality is still sturdy. It seems that Morina is still his puppet after all. Although she has self-awareness and still has a complete soul, but still needs to abide by the power of the law in Rathma's spell. Although it is true that you resurrected me and restored me to my previous appearance, it is normal to stare at a woman's breasts and think about obscene things and get beaten. Morina's voice sounded again, making Cain quite embarrassing. He did take a few extra glances just now. After all, he is only a young man in his 20s. Of course, you look quite strong, and I don't mind what happens to you, but I'm afraid it's not suitable here. This time Morina said. She is not a shy person with part of Amazon blood. After discovering Cain's shyness, he immediately started teasing him. Ah, let's forget it, let's go home directly. Cain immediately turned his head and walked downstairs. He didn't forget that Morina was summoned from Bullseye's corpse, and she was also his own puppet. He felt very awkward, and he was going to go back and recall the spell Rathma taught him to see if there was a way to cut off the connection between the puppet and its master. This kind of spiritual communication did not make him happy. It seems that this young man is quite innocent. Fortunately, this time he will not face an evil master like Andriel again. Morina smiled and followed. In fact, when she found out that she had become some kind of puppet again, she was even more afraid than Cain. After all, she didn't have any good memories of the time when she became a blood crow, but it seems that there is no need to worry about this. 1 o'clock, this time the host is very interesting, maybe this life will have a different experience. Cain took Morina back to his own second-hand Ford on the side of the road, and drove towards home. When he drove out of the street, he suddenly thought that he seemed to have forgotten something, and after thinking about it, he drove straight away. Gone, and because of Morina's appearance, a set of numbers representing the time suddenly appeared on the remote control of the bomb he dropped on the ground, and it was still decreasing. After Cain left, the man on the side of the road dialed the phone again. Sir, the dead whisperer has also left, and there is an extra woman in the car. Yes, I will arrange someone to monitor him. Okay, I have arranged for the aftermath, and they will be cleaning up the scene soon. Boom. Before the words were finished, a violent explosion occurred on the top floor of the Brad Street Hotel. Fortunately, because of the entry of the puzzle, there were no homeless people in the entire abandoned street, so it did not cause any accidents, but disturbed the rest of the surrounding residents, made them a little bit worried. Snapped. Cain, who was about to get home, slapped his thigh in the car. It's broken, I forgot about the bomb. Cain quickly took out Jigsaw's mobile phone to call the police, and then threw it away. Unfortunately, He didn't know that he was being targeted. Although the shield. But they still know something about this newly promoted superhero who goes out from his bar every day to fight for righteousness. At least the neighborhood where he lives has been determined. Of course, their sense of Kane will definitely not be very good now, because they put the matter of falling off the top floor of the hotel is also on his head. After a busy night, SHIELD, the police and firefighting and other government departments finally packed up the hotel. The man in the black suit who used to make phone calls on the side of the road also returned to SHIELD's base in New York City. When I was in my office, I found a dark figure standing in front of the window. "Sir, why are you here?" The man in the black suit who finally recognized Soy Ying's identity put the gun back into the pouch. The black shadow turned around, and it was a one-eyed black man. If Kane was here, he would definitely call out his name, Nick Fury, the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D. He asked back, "How is the scene, Phil?" There were no civilian casualties. Although there were a large number of dead bodies, they were all identified as belonging to gangsters, and they died before the explosion. Phil Coulson, Nick Fury's most powerful subordinate, replied, and since judging from the situation at the scene, most of them were killed by the person who called himself the Death Rattler. He hesitated for a moment, but told Nick Fury about his discovery. "According to my observation, the gangsters who died at the hands of the Death Whisperer are the same as before, and the internal organs have shown different degrees of exhaustion." Nick Fury frowned. "What about the radiation situation at the scene?" "I checked. There is no radiation. It is very clean. It is more like a spell similar to the God of Spear." Nick Fury nodded, obviously relieved. "If this special ability of the Death Rattler has extremely strong radiation, I am afraid S.H.I.E.L.D. will take measures against him, and for this kind of person who is obviously not a bad person, the last thing he wanted was for the psychic to take action, because in the end it would only benefit the trash of human society, and S.H.I.E.L.D. would lose a potential helper. Well, I came to New York to do other things, so I stopped by to see this new Death Whisperer. Since you have done a good job, I can rest assured that he will be handed over to the New York branch later." Observe. After finishing speaking, Nick Fury walked out the door. It seems that he really didn't come here specially for the Death Whisperer. "Yes, sir, but what level of observation do we use?" "It's fine to be at the same level as the Punisher, don't get too close, but someone must be watching the whole process." "Clear. Killing Night. This is the name of Kane's masterpiece that night. Of course, it is an unofficial name circulated in the underground world. The information transmission and response in the underground world are much faster than the normal world. In less than a week, the law and order in New York City has been greatly improved. The local gangsters also strictly restrain their subordinates not to cause trouble during this sensitive period. It is said that even Jin Bin found a reason to leave New York. After all, a total of more than 300 gangsters with heavy weapons were slaughtered overnight, and even the Bullseye was folded there. This is enough to attack the New York police headquarters. The strength of this battle completely frightened the gangsters in New York. There was even a rumor that a gangster was frightened to death by the sentence that the Punisher came. However, this was mainly related to his heart disease. Kane, who hadn't harvested his soul for several nights in a row, was relieved. He was not a cold-blooded killer. Most of his harsh attacks on gangsters were based on a revenge mentality, and what he killed were all bloody monsters. As long as the society is stable and the people are safe, he feels that it's okay if there is no income from the spirit. Rathma's way of balance is not to teach them to turn living people into skeletons everywhere. Kane, who was free, simply started the small bar again. After all, he is still alive and still needs money to eat. If there is no stable source of income, the bank will even take back his bar. He can't bring Morina go sleep on the street. As for Morina's work in a familiar environment, it is easier than Kane imagined. As his puppet, Kane can directly instill the knowledge in his mind into Morina's brain through soul transmission, only for one night. The former Archer hero has all the knowledge of modern society. Morina, who was familiar with the environment, immediately brought surprises to Kane. Morina, who has been fighting against demons on the grassland all year round, has a pretty good barbecue skill. With bread and sauces, the new signature dish of the bar is barbecue. The hamburger was freshly baked, and the old neighbors were full of praise for this new dish, which brought the bar's business back to normal immediately, and even spread the word of mouth, attracting residents from farther afield to try it. "Hello, boss, a barbecue burger and a cup of black coffee. Okay, just a second. After a while, Kane brought out a plate containing barbecue burgers and a cup of coffee from the back kitchen and put them on the bar counter. Please use it slowly, sir. Oh, it smells so good. Your cooks are really skilled. A man wearing sunglasses praised after sniffing the food on the plate. From the guide stick in his hand, it can be seen that he is blind. Thank you, it's the first time I've seen you. Did you just move to the neighborhood? It's not dinner time, and there was only this one customer in the bar, so Kane simply started talking to him. Yes, I just opened a law firm in a nearby block. I have been looking for some delicious food nearby for the past few days. After this meal, I don't think I need to go to other places to try my luck. This a blind man said with a smile, then took out a business card from his jacket pocket and handed it over. My name is Matt Murdock, nice to meet you. Hello, my name is Kane Joe, the owner of this bar. I am also very glad to meet you. Kane's heart skipped a beat, but he immediately regained his composure. Kitchen, wow, you are so bold. Hee, I just got my lawyer's license not long ago. As you know, there are not many places in Manhattan that a novice lawyer like me can afford to rent, so Hell's Kitchen is my only choice. Matt pouted. By the way, do you know me? Kane refilled his coffee and smiled. Why do you ask that? Matt pointed to the position of his heart. When I said the name, your heart beat a little faster. Although I couldn't see my eyes, my other senses became a little stronger. Kane couldn't help feeling a bit. Daredevil is Daredevil after all. Nothing can escape his ears, but how to explain to him? He recalled his previous memories, in the impression that Daredevil and Spider-Man and Frank seemed to have a good relationship, so he replied with a smile. I once heard this name from a little spider that appeared at night, and Frank is also my friend. Matt thought about Spider-Man's character, and immediately believed Kane's words. He shook his head with a wry smile. That guy's mouth is always so talkative, why can he say everything? Well, let's get to know each other again. T. Murdock, Daredevil. Kane Joe, Death Whisperer. Kane also stretched out his hand and held it with Matt. Matt's hand is quite strong and covered with calluses. It seems that his superb stick skills and hard practice are inseparable, which superhero is not so simple. By the way, Matt, did you come to me specifically? Kane asked curiously. Besides Frank, Daredevil was the second superhero who knew his true colors. He was somewhat surprised that he came from How Did You Hear the News? Oh no, in fact, I really came out to look for food, and I was attracted by the smell of barbecue in your store, but as soon as I came in, I found that you and your chef are physically different from ordinary people, so I feel sorry for you. Some attention. Well, Morina's barbecue is really a good thing, and it even has the effect of attracting superheroes. Kane really doesn't know what to say about it. By the way, Kane, be careful. Recently, I heard that someone is watching you. Oh, yes, do you know their identities? Kane raised his interest. After all, he hadn't absorbed the spirit for several days. It's the Hand, a ninja killer organization that takes money to do things. It is said that the gang raised a sum of money and gave them a sum of money to kill you and the Punisher. Be careful, these guys are very good at concealment, and they are also proficient in fighting. Hot weapons. The most terrifying thing is that they have no fear of death, and you are likely to face endless ninjas. Matt described to Kane seriously. No fear of death, endless. Kane smiled. His impression of Daredevil only comes from the movie, and the Hand has no other impression except that they are Daredevil's enemies, so this he wasn't too worried. How many people are there in this group called the Hand? Is there 300? I don't think they will be more difficult to deal with than those guys from Killing Night. Matt shrugged. Indeed, facing more than 300 thugs, this young man and the Punisher both survived and wiped out the opponents. It seems that the Hand is not a big problem. Master Gunsu, he hasn't really faced these legendary killers yet, so he didn't object to Kane's words. Instead he said with a smile, you were right, what the two of you did that night is amazing enough, that's it, but be careful, call me if you have anything to do, more people will have more strength. Okay, I will notify you if necessary. By the way, if I have any legal questions, can I find you? I still lack a lawyer. Living in American society, a lawyer is still indispensable. For superheroes like them, a lawyer who is also a superhero is the perfect choice. Okay, I have just opened a new business and haven't come in yet. I will sign the contract with me in a while. As the first customer, I will also have your delicious burger here. I will give you a discount. By the way, Matt, is there any way you can get someone an identity? Quote. I'm a serious lawyer. Well, I'd better ask Frank. At the same time, in the laboratory of the Osborne Group in Manhattan Island, there was a burst of wild laughter. Ha 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 ha, that's great. I finally found the correct equation, and this time my genetic modification plan can be carried out smoothly. Peter, you are such a genius. Do you know that we may create a new era, a perfect era with no flaws, no weak people? The one who laughed was a one-armed man in a large laboratory, and Spider-Man Peter Parker was standing beside him. Professor, I think we still need a lot of experiments. It will take a long time for this equation to be used clinically. Peter quickly reminded Dr. Connors, fearing that he might be impulsive. It's hard to say. I know, don't worry, I'm just too happy. Peter, do you know how much I've put my heart and soul into this project? This is my life's pursuit, and it won't be ruined. I will start the in vivo experiment as soon as possible, strive to perfect this equation within 1 year so that it can enter the clinical stage. I think I need your help. After all, this is the equation you provided. How about being my assistant? I am short of a laboratory assistant, and the salary is certain it will satisfy you. Dr. Kurt Connors talked endlessly, and Peter didn't object. After all, he really needs some salary now. Superheroes also have to eat, and he is constantly improving himself. The equipment, these did not fall from the sky. While the two of them were still discussing the next experimental plan enthusiastically, a man in black outside the laboratory had quietly left and made a phone call in an empty corridor. Yes, Dr. Connors has already. After completing the equation, the finished product can be made immediately. I understand. Okay, don't worry, Mr. Osborne. In the dead of night, with the lights still on in Osborne's laboratory, Dr. Connors carefully fixed a mouse with a broken leg on an apparatus, and then injected a small bottle of green medicine into its body. Come on, baby, let me see your strong willpower and the feasibility of this technology. Dr. Connors stared closely at the struggling little white mouse. Suddenly, a miracle happened. Pink and tender granulation sprouted from the severed limb of the little white mouse that had been severed for a long time. Not long after, a new leg had just appeared there, no different from its other old legs in terms of appearance. Crack, clap, clap, there was a burst of applause, and a man in a black suit came out from the darkness, staring at the little white mouse on the table. This is really a miracle, isn't it, a doctor? Dr. Connors saw the man in black frowned. Obviously he didn't like this guy very much. This is the result of rigorous science and hard work. Well, whatever it is, this is a milestone in the history of human medicine, isn't it, doctor? I think human trials can begin immediately. No, I refuse. Dr. Connors looked at him and said decisively, this serum hasn't reached that stage yet. I need more time to observe. I'm afraid we don't have that much time. What do you mean? Doctor, you know that Osborne has invested a lot of money in your experiments. Recently, due to the successful development of Stark Industries' new weapon, the Jericho missile, our stock price has fallen sharply. The company's board of directors needed a blockbuster product to save face with the military, and this serum is a good one. That's your business. I'm just a scientist. Science is rigorous. If you shorten the research process at will, you will get into trouble. Doctor. Seeing that Dr. Connors was stubborn, the man in black suddenly yelled, don't forget my identity. I have the right to close the laboratory and fire you at any time. All the research results here belong to Osborne, not you, and I want you to remember that. Facing the tough man in black, Dr. Connors gave in. But, where do you find volunteers? Our relationship with the military is not bad. There are countless disabled soldiers waiting for our rescue. No, you can't do this. Dr. Connors was angry. He used to be a military doctor. His broken arm was lost in the war. His conscience did not allow these unscrupulous capitalists to use the serum with unconfirmed results. Use it on your comrades. Unfortunately, his strength is too weak. The man in black narrowed his eyes and put away his smiling face. Well, from now on, you are no longer an employee of Osborne. You have one night to pack things, including your I don't want to see you here again tomorrow morning, these little mice. After speaking, the man in black turned and left, taking the serum on the table with him. This is my research result. How can you take it away so easily, and use it on those soldiers who have been disabled for the country? Well, since human experiments must be carried out, let's start with me, anyway no matter what, I made this up. In despair, Dr. Connors took out a bottle of serum from the cold storage and injected it into his body. The huge pain made him fall into a faint, which made him miss it was a horrible scene. The mouse that had been injected with the serum before suddenly swelled up and broke the cage. Its teeth and claws also began to grow and become sharp, and its temper became irritable. It directly grabbed the cage next to it and rushed towards it. The same kind it used to be. After an unknown period of time, Dr. Connors woke up, and he was pleasantly surprised to find that his arm that had been broken for more than 20 years grew out again, and it seemed to be much stronger. Then he discovered that not only his arm with the new arm, even his body was much stronger, and the feeling of strength made him feel like he could kill a bull with one punch. However, his first task now is to stop the man in black because he already has him as a living specimen, so there is no need to harm those innocent disabled soldiers. Emma, where did Mr. Robert go? Doctor, I see Mr. Robert's car driving north. Okay, I know. Hey, the angry Dr. Connors smashed the microphone and the phone, but his hand was not hurt at all, but now the angry doctor didn't care about it. He looked towards the north direction from the window, and the distance a sea crossing bridge was faintly visible. North, that's the Veterans Hospital. Is that fool so impatient? I must stop him. Dr. Connors hailed a taxi and headed north to the sea crossing bridge. The Veterans Hospital was on the other side of the bridge. The anger in his chest was constantly burning, so he didn't realize that some scales began to appear on his skin. Things. At this moment, the man in black named Robert appeared in Osborne's private mansion, standing respectfully in front of a thin middle-aged man, and the serum researched by Dr. Connors was held in his pocket. Hand. Is this the kind of serum? The middle-aged man asked. Yes, Mr. Osborne. It turned out that this middle-aged man was the big boss of the Osborne Group, Norman Osborne. You've done a good job, Robert. Starting tomorrow, you'll gather people to continue researching this serum. As for the test product, don't worry, it will be delivered to you soon. Okay, Mr. Osborne, but is there really no problem without Dr. Connors? Didn't you say that the most critical formula for this serum was provided by an assistant named Peter Parker? Promote him to the laboratory supervisor and continue the research work. By the way, don't let him know the specific test process, just put the test, give him the data. Okay, I fully understand, then I will take my leave first. After watching Robert leave, Norman Osborne walked into his large study room with a bottle of serum tightly in his hand. He passed through the rows of bookshelves, and he came to the innermost corner, where there was an oil painting self-portrait of himself. Norman Osborne pressed a pattern on a corner of the portrait without hesitation, and his portrait rose slowly upwards, revealing another oil painting, but this oil painting was completely different from the previous one. There is a green-scaled creature with sharp teeth in the mouth and two horns on the top of the head, and a burning volcano in the background. Norman Osborne whispered to the oil painting. Surprisingly, he didn't speak any human language. After a few words, a green mist began to diffuse on the painting, and through the looking at the fog, the whole painting seems to come alive. Osborne, you better have a good reason to summon me, otherwise I will completely wipe out your short lifespan. A hoarse voice came from the painting. Norman Osborne, who has a superior status, bowed to the painting like a humble servant at this moment. Yes, I have something very important to report to you. Good morning, Mr. Joe, your newspaper. In the early morning, a cute little guy pushed the door into the bar and put a copy of the New York Times on the table by the door. Hey, Jimmy, there's bread and milk on the table, leave after eating. Kane greeted the little guy with a smile. He is a child from a nearby family. Because of the good security recently, he accepted a newspaper delivery job to support the family. Kane likes this well-behaved child very much, so he usually prepares a breakfast for him. No, Mr. Joe, today's newspaper is late, I have to deliver it as soon as possible, thank you for the bread. Jimmy smiled at him, picked up the bread next to him and rushed out of the bar. Kane came to the door and picked up the milk, and picked up the newspaper while drinking, but a picture on the front page made him stop drinking the milk immediately. Godzilla invades New York, Spider-Man saves the world. This is the headline on the front page of today's newspaper, with a picture of a huge monster covered in scales, lifting a car and throwing it into the sea. while Spider-Man in the distance coming from the sky, the movement of the hand seems to be launching spider silk. Dr. Lizard. Kane was impressed by this Spider-Man's archenemy. He was not a bad guy, and even had a great original intention, but in the end he did something that endangered the safety of the people in the city. Kane felt a little sympathetic to him. Of course it would be best, the only way to save him is to stop him before he does it, either by returning him to normal, or by trapping him in a bone prison. Kane read the newspaper and saw that although Spider-Man stopped Dr. Lizard's atrocities, he let him go to save the citizens, and the police had no clue about his traces. Kane recalled, in his impression, the doctor hid in the sewer and continued his research there. Sewer. Frank. It's broken. Kane thought of the Punisher who also lived in the sewer, immediately dropped the newspaper, turned around and greeted Morina, picked up a bag of bread and barbecue, and rushed out of the bar. The sewers, the Punisher base. Frank maintains his weapons here as usual, and he usually nests here during the day. A large amount of water vapor in the sewers will accelerate the corrosion and aging of firearms, so he needs a lot of time to maintain his light and heavy weapons in this room. Being a superhero is not as easy as you think. There was a slight breathing sound by his ear, and Frank immediately picked up the loaded Colt Python on the table and pointed it at the door. Relax, it's me. Kane stood there with his hands raised. Speak sooner next time, or I won't guarantee that I won't shake my hands. Frank closed the safety and put the gun back in place. Come on, the sooner you make a sound. The one you took out is not a pistol, I don't know you yet. Kane threw the food on the side table. Hey, bring you some food, eat military rations all day, you are not afraid of malnutrition. The nutrition of military rations is very balanced, but at most it tastes poor. Yes, but the calories are also very high. It can turn you from a small piece of fresh meat into a piece of old fat in 4 years. Kane said, looking at Frank's previous photos. Frank wanted to pick it up again. The impulse of the pistol was gone. Are you here specially to deliver food? No, I'm not that free yet. Now, read today's newspaper. Kane threw the page reporting on Dr. Lizard in front of Frank. What does this have to do with me? Frank asked strangely after reading it. Please, think about it carefully. A big guy that has caused so much damage will definitely attract everyone's attention, and it can successfully evade the police and FBI's tracking. Where do you think it will hide? You mean, it's in the sewer? It looks like a reptile. The cold and damp sewers are their favorite, and it extends in all directions, and there are no cameras. Otherwise, why would you choose to hide here? Okay, you're right. After pondering for a moment, Frank immediately assembled the assault rifle at hand and walked towards the combat uniform hanging on the side. That guy may be here. No reptiles such as geckos were found in the room. You must know that there were at least 20 here before. I thought it was an illusion. It seems to be because of that guy. After the equipment was finished, Frank went out first. I'm only familiar with the sewers in a few blocks nearby, and it's hard to tell if it's farther away. It doesn't matter. I will open the eyes of the spirit, so the huge guy's soul will not be too small. As long as it comes within 100 yards, I can find it. Kane also put on the bone armor and took it a few grenades. There are not so many dead bodies in the sewer for him to explode, and there is only one opponent, so it is more convenient to use grenades. The two moved forward in the sewer, and found that all the reptiles that could be seen everywhere in the past had disappeared, and only the rats were left walking through it. We should really bring a lizard down and follow it, so we don't have to search aimlessly. Frank lamented the good drainage system in New York City. It has been 2 hours, and they still have nothing. Maybe I can try. Frank's words reminded Kane that although they didn't have lizards at hand, there was absolutely no shortage of corpses in the sewer. Kane found a small lizard that had just died in the water, injected a small amount of spirit power into it, and then a small skeleton lizard came out of the water. Looking at the little guy's toothpick-like bones, Frank couldn't help being stunned. What is this, a skeleton dog? Kane rolled his eyes. Even if I really summoned a skeleton dog, it's useless. What can a dog without a nose do? The souls of these lizards that just died haven't dissipated yet. I re-injected them into the bones. Animals, what the scientists call animal instinct, is soul imprinting for the priests of Rathma, and hopefully it is through their soul imprinting that the big guy attracts the little lizards, so we can follow it to the right place. Kane put the skeleton lizard on the ground, and after a while, it became restless. The skeleton head that lost its eyeballs looked left and right, then chose a direction and quickly crawled over. Good luck, keep up with it. Kane smiled at Frank, and chased after it first. Following the little guy, Kane and Frank turned east and west to a road full of water, and there was a loud sound of water ahead, indicating that the front was the intersection of several sewers. After walking a further distance, Kane suddenly stopped and grabbed Frank. What happened? I feel a powerful soul ahead, get ready. Kane opened the eye of the spirit again, and at the same time held the bone scythe in his hand. Frank also opened the safety of the rifle, and aimed the gun at the direction. When he came to the last corner, the sound of rushing water was in his ears. Frank patted Kane on the shoulder, signaling that he was in position and ready to cover with fire at any time. Kane also nodded slightly, and rushed out. Unfortunately, the scene in front of them was completely different from what they had imagined. There was a man in a red and blue tights lying beside a large pool. Frank, it's Spider-Man, Kane yelled and ran over quickly. There were 3 hideous big openings on the chest of Spider-Man's tights, and the skin underneath was also turned out. The white wound covered by blisters was still oozing blood, and he also seemed to be in a coma. Frank also arrived later and pulled off Spider-Man's mask. This kind of thing affects breathing, so Frank never wears it. After sighing with emotion at the young face under the mask, Frank immediately prepared to give him first aid, but Kane was not in such a hurry, but instead persuaded, Frank, don't panic, his injury is not as serious as imagined, at least I've learned from his soul I don't see much weakness. Frank heard the words and immediately looked at Spider-Man's wound. Sure enough, although it was slow, the wound was still slowly healing itself. Let's go, let's take him back to the secret base first, Kane suggested. In this short period of time, the skeleton lizard had crawled into a pipe that was spraying water, and he had no water. The ability to breathe, so he can only give up at this point. Moreover, he feels that Dr. Lizard's violent temper will not last long in the sewer, so it is more convenient to deal with him on the ground. Spider-Man's recovery ability is really not covered. He opened his eyes less than half an hour after returning to Frank's secret base, and then saw the person he least wanted to see. Oh, Punisher, and the white-haired one, I guess you're a death rattler. My luck is terrible, I was chased by a sewer crocodile, and finally saw 2 executioners. Spider-Man really deserves to be the talkative king who is as famous as Deadpool in the Marvel world, and now Kane has the idea of wanting to kill him. Hey, we saved you, can't you thank us? Thank you, why, I am still far away from death. Oh, let me think about it. The wound that could have been healed in 10 minutes took about half an hour to heal after your treatment. Is this your rescue? Hey, Bug, when I say help, I mean I stopped Frank so that he didn't use a shotgun to punch a hole in your head. I think a spider that lost its head might not survive. Kane also he's just a 20-year-old young man, and when it comes to his words, he thinks he's not inferior to others. Aha, didn't the Punisher only kill sinners? He finally revealed his true nature. American citizens have the right to shoot anyone who invades their homeland. Homeland, do you mean the sewer? Oh please, when did the government sell this place to the Punishers? Besides, are there too many reptiles in your house? Don't you know how to clean it regularly? Go away. Frank, who had been silent all this time, finally couldn't help it anymore, and directly issued the order to evict the guest. Peter Parker turned and walked out, but when he reached the door, a police intercom made him stop. Headquarters, main station, this is Sherwood Avenue, we found the crocodile, opened fire. Okay, the crocodile has been knocked down, 2 teams are coming up to confirm. No, it's not dead, he threw the gas bombs. The brothers are all poisoned and mutating, the main station needs support here. Can you help me, help the whole New Yorker? Spider-Man suddenly turned to Kane and the others and said, unlike before, he looked very struggling and tired now, I know that monster. His name is Connor Dr. C. Because of the formula I provided, he developed a cross-racial gene fusion serum and used it on himself, but it turned out like this. I found his base in the sewer and found that he wanted to use the AOA vaccine launcher of the Sibin group launches this serum into the air to atomize it, and then all the citizens of New York will be infected with this serum and mutate, and then this place will become hell. Kane and Frank looked at each other, immediately picked up the equipment again and walked towards the door. Kane patted Spider-Man on the shoulder and said, let's go, do you really think we are looking for you on purpose? We are go find that monster, you're just a roadside gift. Hey, you can't call the good citizens of New York a gift. Good citizen, why do I read that the newspapers call you a mob who abused lynching? It seems that his reputation is not much better than ours. Dash 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 dash. At this time, on the upper floors of the Osborne building, Robert was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with his mobile phone and looking into the distance. Boss, that monster is approaching the Osborne building. And Norman Osborne, who was talking to him, was admiring his new appearance, smooth skin, and firm muscles in the mirror, all of which made him very satisfied. Do you think he is Dr. Connors? Yes, I called up the video from that night. His serum made him grow an arm, and the smaller monster was also mutated from his little white mouse. Well, evacuate the entire building. These employees are a valuable asset to the company. Then is there a need to mobilize security forces? No, everyone is evacuated, and there is no need to close the laboratory, just ensure that the monitoring is unblocked. I want to see what this big Dr. Connors wants to do. Yes, boss, everything is as you wish. Dash 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 dash. Dr. Connors headed towards the Osborne building unimpeded all the way, because all the cars blocking the road were overturned by him, and the police had already received the order from the headquarters, just watch on the side, don't go up to die. The influence of lizard genes on the doctor is increasing. He even thought that his walking speed was too slow, so he jumped onto the building and crawled on all fours. This also made it more difficult for people behind him to track him. Kane and Frank can't get on the wall. Peter, you pass through the air. As long as you entangle him, we will find a way to support you as soon as possible. Kane said. The impatient Spider-Man had been waiting for this for a long time, and he immediately jumped to the next building. Okay, hurry up, the antidote is in the laboratory on the 43rd floor, you'd better take that to the top floor. In case I fail, you can still use the antidote to save everyone. Seeing Peter approaching the Osborne building quickly, Kane and the others also quickened their pace, and at the same time he called Morina through telepathy. Morina, I need your help. Go to the street and find the highest that building. I'll be there, as soon as possible. It's the Punisher and the Death Whisperer. Quick, make way for them. Seeing Kane and the others, the police along the way began to help them evacuate the crowd. People have feelings, and these policemen have learned that their colleagues were attacked by lizards. The matter of the doctor's poisonous hands, they can't help these superheroes in battle because of their ability, but they can help them in other places. Maybe they are all on the wanted list of the police station now, but no one wants to catch them at this time them. With the help of the police, Kane and the others moved a lot faster. Not only that, but 2 motorcycles with flashing police lights also came to them. Quick, brother, get in the car. Thank you. Kane and Frank sat on it immediately, and the motorcycle headed towards the Osborne building with the siren blaring. You're welcome. That disgusting crocodile is turning our brothers into monsters, please greet it for us. And at this time, the fastest Spider-Man had already fought Dr. Lizard on the rooftop. Boom! Dr. Lizard smashed a guardrail with a flick of his tail, but the nimble Spider-Man jumped away in time, and turned around and sprayed a strand of spider silk on Dr. Lizard's face. Of course, his mouth was not idle. He said, Hey, Mr. Lizard, although your strength is great, your brain may have shrunk. Otherwise, why do you always miss the target? Peter Parker, have all your enhancements been used on the tongue? Haha, aren't you just like me? Look, what an agile body and a strong body. This is the correct direction of human evolution. The first part of that equation, one of the experimenters is you. Although I don't know who led it, he is indeed a genius. Come on Peter, let's work together to make this serum more perfect. Of course, the premise is to save the people in this city first. Probably the backpack dropped in the sewer exposed his identity. Peter was not surprised that Dr. Lizard called him out. As a new superhero, he still needs to learn a lot, but this does not mean that there will be some wavering in the position. No, you are wrong, Dr. Connors, my birth was just an accident. Science needs to be carefully verified. Isn't this also your point of view? You can't use these drugs to change at will other people's lives, its side effects are too great. Look at yourself, what has become? Stupid, what's the use of appearance, powerful body, regenerative ability? These are the direction of human evolution. If you want to stop me from saving mankind, you are my enemy. Dr. Lizard roared, and rushed towards Peter with great strides. I'm sorry, Doctor, you're wrong. Peter's advantage lies in his agility and clever mind. He stuck Dr. Lizard's ankle with spider silk and tripped him, and then took the opportunity to wrap him tightly with the spider silk. However, that's all. Dr. Lizard's strength and regenerative ability are stronger than him, so Peter, who doesn't want to kill people, has no way to further restrict him. Finally, Kane and Frank arrived at the Osborne building. The empty building made it easy for them to find the elevator and go to the top floor. Suddenly Kane remembered something and asked, "Frank, do you know how to make the antidote?" Frank looked at Kane expressionlessly when he heard the words, "I joined the army when I was 18. Well, the subtext of this sentence is that I didn't even go to college and you asked me if I would make a genetic antidote." Kane sighed, "Okay, let's just go to the top and replace Peter." "Didn't you go to college?" "I study history." Boom! As soon as the elevator door opened, Kane and the others saw Peter flying sideways in front of them. He didn't forget to turn his head and look at them in the air and complained, "Why are you here?" "Aging. Bone spear. Da. Too lazy to pay attention to Peter's bad mouth, Kane directly repelled Dr. Lizard with 2 spells. He was actually aiming at the heart, but he was dodged. Unleash a fatal blow. "Okay, thank you for coming. What about the antidote?" "You do it yourself," Frank replied after a short burst. "What? I have been fighting above for so long and I have to prepare the antidote myself. Can't you two show consideration for a wounded person? Otherwise, do you dare to use the antidote prepared by the two of us?" Okay, it's my own fault. I should have thought that this kind of technical work should not be entrusted to you, two rough people." Peter got into the elevator while muttering. To be honest, he was a little tired. Kane and the others arrived in a timely manner. Under the joint attack of Kane and Frank, Dr. Lizard finally began to show his weakness. The lack of long-range attack means is his weakness, and Frank and Kane are both masters of long-range output, especially Frank, who can't leave his head. This made him have to use one hand to protect his eyes and other important organs, and Kane's bone spear can bring him the greatest damage. Unlike bullets, the magical power contained in the bone spear can easily penetrate his tough skin and muscles, caused him repeated injuries. However, this also aroused his fierceness at the same time. After knowing that he could not defeat Kane and the others head-on, Dr. Lizard immediately started a guerrilla war. The top floor of the Osborne building was very wide and there were many obstacles, which gave him enough the spaces roundabout, although Kane can use the Eye of the Spirit to capture his position, but there is no way to attack him. "Kane, I'm going to a high place, be careful." This terrain is even more unfriendly to Frank. The shooting range is too narrow, and as for close combat, he doesn't think he can beat this genetically modified guy. It's a pity that the beast's instinct makes Dr. Lizard more willing to choose the weak one as a breakthrough. Frank just climbed to the top of a room when Dr. Lizard pounced on him. Kane, who arrived in time, was about to make up for it with a bone scythe. Dr. Lizard was hacked out. He rolled over without hesitation and disappeared into the concrete jungle on the roof. "Morina, haven't you found a place yet?" Kane cried in his heart. He began to regret letting Morina find a place by himself. There are not many tall buildings in the shelter, and the blood crow is likely to get lost in the cement, in the jungle. "Hey, little boy, I've seen you." Morina's reply surprised Kane. "Great, where are you? Come to us." "Why do you want to get closer to you?" "I'm at the top of the building next door. I think I'm more suitable to support here." On the top of the building next door, a tall figure was holding a longbow similar to her height. "Well, I have to say that the Blood Crow has more combat experience than himself." Kane comforted himself, and began to worry again. "Morina, can you support us at such a long distance?" "Hee, don't worry, in terms of shooting skills, I will not be inferior to the former owner of this body." Morina's eyes flashed, and a long bone arrow appeared in her right hand. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.